Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast. Episode 255. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, Dr. Norge on the comic forums. Jim is no longer here because he renounced his citizenship on Raging Bullets. I'm joined as always.
I'm not Canadian.
I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of you know. We're not a country. What do you mean you're going to be a Canadian now because you left the show?
Hey, if Superman can renounce his U.S. citizenship, I'm going to become Canadian.
We've got some good friends in Canada who are friends
I know.
of the show. I think that's cool. You would be welcome. We're obviously on this episode. We have to talk about Action Comics 900 and a lot of the controversy surrounding it. We're particularly going to focus on Superman renouncing his citizenship and our thoughts on that. We are joined by friend of the show Art Lyon in a very special second segment that we did with him, totally focusing on Smallville. With the season finale coming up, that's a great little lead-in to that. And then we will be doing an episode on the season finale as well, which I'm really excited about. I want to remind everyone about the Summit City Comic-Con. That's going to be June 18th, 2011, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Grand Wayne Center, 120 West Jefferson Boulevard in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's SummitCityComicCon.com for more information. An amazing guest list has been compiled for this. And this is put on by show sponsors, DCB Service and In Stock Trades. So definitely check them out. Speaking of DCBService.com, we talk on this episode about Smallville and the character of Lois Lane and how much we're really enjoying her. There's an Archives edition that's going to be released that's available for pre-order. It's Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane Archives Volume 1. It's available for 40% off at $35.99. It collects Showcase 9 and 10 and Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane 1 through 8. And these hardcover volumes are absolutely amazing. If you haven't had a chance to check out the archive editions, I highly recommend them. And that's DCBService.com, your comic book pre-order source. Also, if you check over at InStockTrades.com, they have this really cool companion sale going on. They have their archive editions on sale, a whole bunch of classic ones they've got. Everything from Adam Strange to the Action Heroes to All-Star Comics. You name it, 50% off. And these archive volumes are wonderful, gorgeous volumes. You know, they run anywhere retail-wise from $50 to $75, and you can get them at 50% off. This is a great chance. If you've been thinking about them, kind of on the fence, go over to InStockTrades.com. Remember, orders of $50 or more get you free shipping, so it's a great chance to get those at an amazing discount. So I want to thank DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for supporting Raging Bullets. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth in the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing in the show. So if we go over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's jump right into our Smallville segment with Art Lyon.
Green Lantern, let you and I destroy that space junk.
Another thing I'm working on, this is also with Archie. I guess I got this gig because I'm working on Sam Hill, but I'm working on the Governator.
Oh, is that the one with the Arnold Schwarzenegger takeoff?
Yes, yeah. It's Stan Lee's people and Arnold Schwarzenegger's people. The comic book is written by Chuck Dixon. It's drawn by James Fry, who's done a bunch of other stuff for Archie. And yeah, I'm coloring that. I've actually got the first 8 pages done, almost the first 12. And there's going to be a preview available at San Diego, I think. Like a 12-page preview. I wouldn't be surprised if Arnold Schwarzenegger is there himself. Please don't quote me on that, but it is San Diego, and he lives not that far away. So
that'd be a crazy book not to really reveal at San Diego.
Yeah.
Just because it'd be kind of like a no-brainer. Like, why would you not reveal that there, considering where you're going to be? That's cool.
That's an interesting project because there's a lot of people who have to review and approve every page and the script and the coloring and penciling and the inking. It's a complicated project.
Now, as you're working on it, are you catching yourself doing Arnold impersonations as you're coloring?
Yes, I do. It's almost impossible to read the script and not, in my head, read his lines in the Arnold voice.
Nice.
Now, is the premise of that one, is it like an Arnold action movie, or what is the premise of it?
The premise is that Arnold Schwarzenegger is retiring from politics, but still wants to, be active, and so he basically becomes a superhero.
Nice.
He's got a like a hidden headquarters. He's got some helpers. He's got like a super-powered motorcycle and like a bunch of power suits, and it's nutty.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, as it should be. I mean, just the whole premise, it sounds like a fun read. So that's cool. It sounds like something should be a film eventually. Like
Who knows? Anything's possible.
For years since we've known you, we've periodically done Smallville episodes with you.
Yeah, Smallville.
So it's interesting now, after all this time of talking Smallville with you, to come back and chat about the final season. I mean, and I never thought that there would be 10 seasons of this show. I mean, it's amazing.
It really is amazing. You know, most shows don't go that long. Most shows go maybe 7 years. I'm not sure why, but that's like an unwritten rule. 7 years. My understanding is that 7 years makes like a really optimal rerun package. But yeah, this show's gone on 10 years, and it has really changed if you look at all the seasons and the kind of show it was in the first season compared to what it was in the, the fifth or sixth season and what it is now. It's really changed and grown, and it's just a very different show.
They hit a point where they had to go beyond the original premise because they were trying to keep it within a limited scope for Clark. Understandably so, because they were looking at, okay, we're going to end about here, so we want to keep it really contained to this. Well, then it comes a point where, like, okay, we're going, like, season-wise way beyond our original premise, so now what do we got to do? And if anything, it looks like it was originally planned that way, if you look at the way the storyline went, because they really did kind of organically go more into it being a lot more of a superhero show, where we're getting a lot of quirky DC characters being brought in, all in ways that just seem to fit naturally into the original Smallville premise, which is amazing.
Well, and they've done this great job of like, it's almost like everybody else knows what Clark is supposed to be doing except him. You can get these appearances by other DC characters who, for one reason or another, know something about Clark or what he becomes. And it's, the most recent episode with Booster Gold, he's got insight from the Legionnaires, Dr. Fate, Zatanna, I think, had some kind of flash or insight or whatever. It's really become a show about, initially it was a show about young high school Clark Kent and sort of what his life was like back then. And I don't know that they planned on bringing him like all the way to right when he becomes Superman. But the show has transformed into this exploration of his struggle with, or his fear of losing his humanity. I think that's what's on the show, that's what has held him back from becoming a costume superhero. Because, obviously there are already in the world of Smallville costume superheroes, but he hasn't gone that route because he's afraid, really.
It's funny when you look at some of the recent episodes of Smallville, it's kind of an appropriate time to talk about this show, especially with you working on FlashPoint Project Superman. We've got like this alternate Earth that has been brought heavily into the show in such a pivotal way, and especially the last couple of weeks. And I love that we've got characters now that are in the Smallville universe, and this is a very DC thing. Although it's been done at Marvel, too, with Age of Apocalypse, where you've got characters from that other world that have been, that stayed and stuck around. And we know we've got this Flashpoint event coming up this summer, where we're going to see a different take because of some event or some events that are going to shift the DC universe over this way. And then it's going to shift back, but there's going to be things that stick because it shifts back. It's interesting to see Smallville exploring this right now. It's almost like the show is naturally leading into the way the comics are going right now this summer.
That's interesting. Yeah, I wonder if that's at least a little bit intentional, because I know that Jeff Johns has worked on the show a couple times now, and I know that Warner Brothers is trying to sort of streamline or like meld their different media in terms of the comic book properties, trying to meld them a little bit more and coordinate things more. So it might be that that's to some degree intentional. I don't know.
Well, I think if you're going to coordinate the DC universe, one of the things that you need to establish to anybody in somewhere in the media is the fact that there are multiple universes. Because I think that is a core concept with DC that's been around since the Silver Age. with with the Flash connecting with the Golden Age Flash, and straight on through the Justice League having JSA crossovers and all that. Okay. I think it's an important thing to establish that a single shifting event can create a whole alternate world, which will then affect the entire supporting cast in a way that, and it's not uncommon in DC for one of these characters or more to pop over into our world and shake things up.
Mm-hmm. Usually I tend to avoid events and crossovers. Usually I'll just continue reading the titles I usually read, and between reading those and reading stuff online, news or rumors online, I get the gist of what's going on in the big crossover. FlashPoint, usually I tend to avoid the events and crossovers because it usually means you have to buy a whole bunch of stuff, or even if you don't, you feel like maybe you ought to. So, but FlashPoint I'm really interested in and I hope it's really successful, because I think it's an interesting way of doing a crossover. It's like a new approach to it, in that, actually I posted this on the boards, the Raging Bullets boards. I changed my username. I am now Man of Two Worlds.
I responded to you on it.
Okay.
Yeah, because you mentioned that you were Buddy Blank. I'm like, oh, this is Art. So,
right. Yeah. It's interesting to me because it's a crossover in which, the main crossover is how long? The main miniseries is what, 3 issues? Or
I think it's 5. It might be
5 issues. Okay. It's interesting in that it takes advantage of the Elseworlds thing, like you were talking about, the multiple universes thing. It takes advantage of that, which I think is a strength of the DC universe and something that they should use and not be afraid of. But I understand that they're afraid of overusing it and of confusing people. But I think if every year you did an event, a crossover, not necessarily a huge thing, but an event in which you have a storyline that takes place in an altered Earth, and it's self-contained and has one core title and has ripples which affect a handful of other titles, and then has lasting effects, not huge effects necessarily, but relevance beyond a time period in which that miniseries is published. I think that's a really interesting way of using the multiverse, and an interesting way of doing a crossover event. And it reminds me of the old JLA, JSA crossovers, which I loved when I was a kid.
It's one of the things that I like about Smallville, embracing that. Mm-hmm. Is this idea that the DC universe does have those other worlds. And Elseworlds is something that I think the DC stepped away from, and I'm glad to see them coming back and embracing again. And I like the idea that this one's going to matter and that it's going to be in there, but I think you shouldn't ignore that avenue of DC, because I think it's an opportunity for creators to really get creative and not be stuck to just one continuity.
Yeah, I think the multiverse is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and it's exactly that. It's a great way to explore ideas, and for writers, and artists to explore different kinds of stories you can't tell, with the characters as they exist now in the main continuity. And it doesn't strictly take place in the DC universe, but unlike Elseworlds, I've enjoyed plenty of Elseworlds stories, but I kind of like this approach in that the characters in the main continuity become aware of this alternate Earth, right? Or there's some kind of interaction between what happens in Flashpoint on this alternate Earth, and afterwards, the impression I get is that there's some kind of effect on the main DC continuity without it being a huge change, that will change everything.
Yeah, because they said that the universe is going to shift back when it's done. So there's an event that's going to cause the universe to shift over to this universe. And we're already seeing the ripples of that happening in the Flash book. Okay. But then Jeff Johns and actually all the writers who have been involved with it are saying that when you come back that there will be effects from this. Mm. And there will be some, major effects from this. So it leads me to believe that we're going to get the universe jumping back where there's going to be titles that obviously will stay the same, in the sense that, they'll be able to continue their continuities as is. And there's books that are obviously not jumping over to Flashpoint. They're going to keep going on during this time, but we're going to, I'm guessing when this eventually shifts back, we'll see then those ripples affect those books as well. I don't know. I'm curious. One of the things I really enjoy about this right now, and this is a testament with the internet and everything that's going on, they've released up to issue number 3, July, teasers.
Okay.
And yet I don't feel like I can answer that question with full confidence, because they've released all these images. We see, characters teaming up together in this world and stuff like that, like Flash and Cyborg and Batman, those versions of it. But yet I'm not sure as far as like,
and it's only going to
what
be
are the
What
are the ramifications going to be from this? I don't know. I like that, because nowadays I do feel like sometimes we know too much, and that ruins the whole point of the event. I like that on this one. I understand the premise. I know a lot about, this is Wonder Woman in this world, this is Aquaman in this world, yet I have no idea how they got that way. I have no idea what them being that way means. I have no idea what their end game's going to be and how they will all interact together. And I love that. I love that. I feel like I know a lot of information, but it yet is telling me nothing at the same time, in a good way. And like the whole you're working on Project Superman. I have no idea what Project Superman is going to be, other than it's going to tell us what happened to Superman, and what Superman looks like in this world. I like that. I like that I don't know. I'm curious as can be to see, okay, what did all this mean for the Superman concept? That's cool. And to be able to explore that, and as a reader to be able to dive into that kind of thing, is to me what has me super excited for this event. It's listed through July as issue number 3, but that doesn't list it as the final issue. I don't know if it is. It could be the final issue of the series. I'm not quite sure how long this book's going.
That's interesting. See, I think that's neat. I think it's important, I think, to have that sense of mystery. It's so easy now to read all kinds of reviews and sneak peeks and interviews and wind up knowing too much. And it's true with comic books and TV shows and movies. I've seen I was thinking about this recently in terms of the Thor movie, which comes out in like a week and a half or whatever.
Excited for that.
Oh, that looks really good.
Yeah, it sure does.
But I read I listened to an interview with Kenneth Branagh, and I read a bunch of early reviews of the movie. I skipped the parts of the review that reveal the plot. I read the beginning of the review and the end of the review, but I reached a point where I became afraid. I was like, I need to stop reading and hearing about this movie, because I don't want to know more about it. I want to be surprised. I want to be thrilled. And so, yeah, I think that I really like the idea of FlashPoint, and I like how they're talking around it, and I like that it's an event which is not an earth-shattering event that will realign the DC universe. I think that those events, to some degree, I think that they run the risk of throwing off readers, or if you enjoy the way that things are in the DC universe right now, if they have a big earth-shattering event that realigns everything, that might make you angry. That's not necessarily what you as a reader want. And I think the Flashpoint is an example of how you can have a really interesting, really neat event that causes some changes, but it doesn't completely realign things like Civil War at Marvel. It was a huge event that really changed the way that people looked at that universe. You know what I mean?
I think one of the great things about events nowadays, and I think the trends just across comics have been continuing, I think creators are looking at, okay, people keep saying that they're quote-unquote getting event-itis, but the truth of the matter is they just want creativity in the events. They want something to draw them into it. And they want to be able to access it in different ways. Meaning, like, if I can't pick up every little piece of it, can I still be a part of the event? And I actually think that's one of the things that I've liked in recent events throughout comics, is that they have, like, these main minis that are the ones that, like, okay, if I can only afford one book and I want to be a part of the event, I can read the main mini and do that. If I want to read 2 or 3 other minis, I'm a Superman fan. I want to read Project Superman along with it. I can read that and the main mini, and I'm getting complete stories reading those things. I think that's really important nowadays with comics, is to provide people a variety of ways of enjoying events. It's like anything. Comics are competing with a lot of different medium now. And I think you want to provide the opportunity where any fan, a Marvel fan who doesn't normally read DC, but hears about this Flashpoint event, if they're saying, hey, I can buy one more book, they should be able to read Flashpoint and dive into that, or any of these minis that are tying into it, and get a complete story. And I like that approach. I think it's something that should be a template for how all of comics considers events now, because I think there's clever ways to do that. And I think it allows the creative teams on those individual projects as well to be able to put their own little stamp on that little universe or that little event for the amount of time that they're a part of it as well.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about digital comics, and I think because you have potentially a bunch of new readers, or, they might not be as hardcore as the readers that go to a comic book store every week or make their monthly online order. But there's a challenge in comic books. In a way, you have to make your comic books accessible to a wider audience now, I think, than maybe you used to, because you're going to have more casual readers reading comic books, or at least, hopefully, as a result of things like the iPad. And I think that FlashPoint is a way of doing that. It's a big event, and yet at the same time, it's a highly focused one.
And I think that's the way, if you think about it, as kids when we jumped onto comics, I think comics were accessible to casual fans. Mm-hmm. I think really the issue is you've got to make sure that those stories are all accessible. But I think you can do that while at the same time still having a balance of nuggets and crannies and connections for longtime readers as well. I think there is a way, and I think we're seeing that a lot more in comics, where there's really great storytelling going on with multiple jumping on points, and with where it's really easy. Because I remember as a kid picking up issues of comics, and I know you did too, and Jim, you probably did at some point as well. I picked up the second part of a story, or the third part of a story, and yet it was written in such a way where even though I was coming in at that point, by the end of the issue, I knew what was going on.
Well, and this was back before they did those one-page recaps. They would occasionally, there would be like a narration block or an editor's note saying, "as revealed, last-ish," that kind of thing. And yet, even though you weren't having things explained to you, like here's what happened, you worked it out. And
the characters had history still, and they had all those little elements to them that, we have today. But yet, it was something that you just figured out. It's like TV. You can start watching a TV show into its run, and, after maybe the first episode, you're a little scratch in your head, but there's a hook that pulled you in enough that you're tuning in next week. And 2 or 3 episodes in, you're pretty much so caught up with everybody else who's been watching the show. If it's written well.
At the same time, you get shows like the classic example now is like Lost, where if you didn't watch for a while, you might be better off waiting until it comes out on DVD or Netflix, which is the equivalent of trades now. I
have friends of mine who have jumped on books like Green Lantern and stuff like that through trades and hardcovers. They're reading the monthly books now. It's my buddy Chris.
Yeah.
He jumped on Green Lantern through hardcovers. And I do think that's one of the joys of comics now is just the different accessibility points of popping on. And through the app. If you buy one comic on the app and you accidentally buy one that's a second part of something, you can go back and buy the first part right then and there and download it instantly. I mean, that's, the different delivery methods are offering accessibility points to comics that I just think are great. And I do think that every medium helps the other one to a certain extent. Because I do think, if somebody becomes a fan of comics through a digital app, that's going to lead somebody into a comic shop that's never been there before.
Hopefully DC is aware of this, and hopefully Marvel and DC, both now being owned by large corporations, hopefully they will understand the dynamic and the potential there, and work out ways of attracting a digital comics reader into a comic book store or a brick and mortar bookstore to pick up trade paperbacks, and how to include like a digital copy of a comic book with the print copy, or all these different kinds of initiatives that you hear about.
That would be a good way to make a digital collector happy. Somebody starts off with a digital collection saying, well, I can go pick up the paper copy and I'll get a voucher to continue my digital collection. Which is kind of, and I'll just be as a fan of the paper comics, I would love that, in the comic shop, being able to get a voucher of some sort towards a digital copy of the book that I've already purchased. I think that would be super cool. So it just gives me another avenue of enjoying my comics in a different way. Yet I'm supporting my favorite retailers as well.
Right.
Yeah, and we got on this because we were talking about alternate Earths in Smallville.
Oh, right, yeah.
And actually, Smallville in and of itself is one big alternate Earth.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Early on, until about the 5th or 6th or 7th season, you could kind of argue that it was still the same continuity. You could kind of fudge things, but now there's just no way.
And I quite like that, actually.
Yeah, I enjoy that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think there's really no reason to stick to that continuity, especially if you're recreating a setting. I mean, for a different kind of audience in a different medium, TV, a show that lasts 10 years with the same actors and then the same basic idea is a heck of a lot different than 10 years of Superman comic books, which will be written and drawn by hundreds of different people.
Great testament to the show is this last week we had that Booster Gold Blue Beetle episode, which I thought was very well done. I thought it captured what works with Booster Gold, especially because it served as an origin of Booster Gold, his whole presentation, and how he's evolved. And a person who watched that episode could pick up the current Booster Gold comic and be right on board. Yet he was totally Smallvilleized, yet it captured at the core his growth and maturity and evolution in one episode. I thought it was great.
Cool. Yeah, that's actually a good point, and another example of the advantage of DC being owned by a large corporation is that they can do that kind of cross marketing, I guess. Kind of if you introduce that character well and you advertise that episode and you make him recognizable and you're able to capture what the essential qualities of that character are. If somebody finds that character interesting, there's lots of comic books out there with Booster Gold in it.
Well, a friend of ours, Joe, he and his wife will watch Smallville, and occasionally they'll have questions. Hey, is so-and-so like this? And and just asking comparison to the comic book world to their Smallville character, and just hey, who is that exactly? Who is the good-looking female in fishnets? Oh, that's Zatanna.
Zatanna.
So and it's stuff like that, and I really do like the fact that I still get that same feel. I still get that same vibe from Smallville that I get from the comics, and I'm especially digging the promotional stuff they've been doing, where they show Clark standing there, and then his shadow is the costume with the cape fluttering.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see what they do in that last episode, man. It's going to be a humdinger.
He's got to put on the cape. He's got to put on the costume and fight in the costume.
I really hope so, but I'm worried there's a lot of forces at work there. They're working on a new Superman movie, but they have the advantage of the fact that they're just in pre-production on that. There's no images, and so there's not really any competition there yet. And so I hope that they take advantage of that, and they put him in that costume and have him in a fight scene. I just, that would be really fun.
I think with the last two episodes, I'm totally convinced now that we're going to get him finally named Superman. Because, that's been alluded to way too much. They're really close now. Booster Gold made reference to it. I love Lois's involvement.
Yeah.
I have to say, my favorite thing in Smallville now, these past, 3 years or so, has been the development of the Clark and Lois relationship. I think has just been really, really well done, and especially the fleshing out of Lois Lane as a character and her role in the creation of Superman, I think, is really, really neat.
Amen.
Her character evolution's been great, because if you think about it, when she first came on, in the first season, and rightfully so, she was written in a way where she was hard to like.
Yes. Yeah, she was.
And that was done on purpose.
Yeah.
He was heavy in the relationship with Lana, and she, we were kind of meeting her as brash. I think it's a testament to the writing and the foresight to plan where they were going to possibly go with that character, to do it that way, because I think she's all the more interesting because she was that character when she first started.
Mm-hmm. She's had a really interesting arc, and she's learned a lot about herself. Usually, in the past, I haven't really much cared for Lois as a character. She's the kind of character who had been interesting for me only if the creators involved or the actress involved was doing a particularly good job with her. But this Lois, the actress's name, Erica
Durance.
Yeah, between her and the writers, they've just done a great job in fleshing out and developing and making you understand that character and who she is and where she comes from and why she is the way she is and why she's so important to Clark.
And the chemistry between her and Tom Welling, I think, is just outstanding, because I actually understand and get why he'd be attracted to her. I get why she'd be attracted to him. There's no gray area there as far as what is what is behind the relationship between these two characters and why and I believe they would genuinely do anything for each other. And that's really pivotally important if you're going to tell me they're a super couple.
Right. You really get the impression that these two people have found that one person that they're supposed to be with. And what's great is that they both recognize it and that they haven't had a lot of that. You'll see this a lot in romantic relationships on TV and in movies where they break up and there's a misunderstanding and it's tragic and then they get back. There hasn't been much of that because these two characters are really maturing pretty rapidly, and they're maturing as a unit, really, kind of.
And I like seeing just the importance she is to Clark. Just not even just on the development of him, but just to him, just how much of a rock she is to him. It's with that Earth 2, the most recent Earth 2 one, where Clark is telling Jonathan, is like, this farm, you always said this farm was nothing without Martha. And just how Martha was Jonathan's strength. We're seeing that same relationship that Lois is Clark's strength. And it's something about the character that I always enjoy in the comics, seeing those two moments. And then in the TV show, seeing just those moments between them always just, it makes me always, I always do the, my little happy dance when I see those kind of moments, like, yay!
I want to see your happy dance someday, Jim.
Well, one day I will show you the happy dance.
Okay, fine, thanks.
You're going to want to tear your eyes out afterwards. But, I see it on a weekly basis, and it's. I'm trying to protect you.
I'm so sorry, Sean.
You'll be even more sorry when you see it.
One of the things I really like about this is just an example of how they've really fleshed out this relationship and the Lois Lane character, how important a motivating force Lois is in the creation of the Superman identity and the creation of the stereotypical Clark Kent identity.
Yeah, I was glad that they introduced the topic, and it's taking multiple episodes for that really to build in and for it to grow. If it had just been introduced, boom, done, it would have lost something. But the fact we've had this go through multiple episodes, and they still, even now, he's still not 100% comfortable with it. And I love the fact that he's like, yeah, if I go into this, what are people going to think of you? That you're marrying this doofus, you're marrying this guy. And I thought that was a great moment.
That was a great moment. It was so sweet of him to be worried about her. You're prepared to be seen with me? I'm going to have to be this dweeb. And that's okay with her.
One of the advantages of having 10 seasons of this show has been that kind of development with these characters. That actually matters because, we've seen her as a career-minded person fighting for this new position. Like, we saw her go from not being interested at all in being a reporter to this being her life, seeing how this became her calling and why it is. And that's something that I think has been great with her development either, because we don't get to see much of that with Lois Lane. If anything, I got to be honest, I would gladly follow a Lois Lane show after this with this storytelling with the character. And that's funny how I could actually say I would separate, I'm not saying that we would take the concept that she's Superman's wife out of it, but saying a show that focused on what does Lois Lane do when Clark's out doing his thing.
That's interesting, yeah.
I would follow that with this character because I like this Lois that much. And I think this is an example of you can make this character into a character that could carry her own comic book if you have this kind of development with the character where she's engaging. I mean, I'm like really into, because she's human. She has faults. She has strengths. We know what her quirks are. You have those moments where you groan because it's a Lois moment, but then you have the other moments where you're like, she is like the coolest girl ever. And you should feel like that with the character, where she's human, she's totally accessible, and Clark is too, because of that relationship. I think she is a great avenue into his faults.
It would be harder, I think, to pull that off in a comic book, at least as consistently as they have pulled it off on Smallville, because I think a lot of the success of that character is from the actress and how good she is at carrying that character.
Oh, yeah.
She's just done a great job. It really is. It's the best Lois that we've had since Margot Kidder, I guess, in that first movie, I think.
Yeah, and if anything, I think that the character's been even more developed than Margot Kidder had a chance to. I mean, obviously because it's on a television series, but even looking back at the classic Superman story, and I don't know if it's even fair, to compare the George Reeves stuff to this, because that was such talking about the ability of a character to adapt. I think that show was perfect for its era. So I'm going to stop myself from even making the comparison between the two. But one of the things I do like about this one for today, I think this is a definitive Lois Lane story.
Mm-hmm. They've really done Lois a great service. The actress and the writers have just done a great job of making her a really worthwhile, really interesting, really, really strong character who's not just Superman's girlfriend or Superman's wife, not second fiddle. She's a really strong character, and you understand why she's doing what she's doing and how important she is to Clark, and like you were saying earlier, that she is his rock, basically.
One of the things that I enjoyed particularly about that Earth 2 episode was Jonathan Kent. And getting to see, not because a lot of times when you do Elseworld stories, you see how changes affect Superman. It was very cool to see how Superman not being a part of his life totally changed things for Jonathan Kent. It wasn't just that it sent Clark Luthor on that negative spiral, but it really sent his life on a downward spiral as well, because it affected Ollie. It affected, which is, again, this is another thing that gets me excited for Flashpoint, is seeing this type of story where you see Clark inspiring Jonathan Kent with his own words, and that's how Jonathan Kent realized that this kid's for real. Like, he knows things that there's no way anybody could know. He's speaking to me in a way that nobody else could. And that moment at the end where he called him son,
right? I
just melted. I was like, wow, John Schneider just hit a home run in that moment.
I really dig him as Pa Kent. And he was a big surprise, too, for me, because when the character was first announced 10 seasons ago, I was like, okay, yeah, but I didn't think I'd be as passionate about him as Pa Kent, and I'm just like, now he's got the character down to the way I want to see this character be, and it just, that great Kansas farmer with those wholesome family values, and just he gives it, and it's the guy who was the inspiration, who was the hero to Superman, and I love just seeing that.
Yeah, I mean, they've the show's been on for 10 years, and they've had all this opportunity to explore stuff like that. I can't remember what year Jonathan died in. Was it, what was it? Was it 6, 7, 8, 7, 6? Anyway, they had years of that character, and it was by far the best development that we've ever had of that character.
And it's funny because this has really been one of the lengthiest times that they've had a Jonathan Kent around. Now, you had the Lois and Clark version with Dean Cain, Terry Hatcher. That Jonathan Kent was around the entire series.
That's right.
So you had pretty good moments there. But even that guy, for me, I thought he was a cool character, and I thought it was neat, a neat Pa Kent, that he was a confidant that Clark could go to. But this one, I really do see more of a Clark a Jonathan that would be an inspiration to Clark, that would be someone who's like, I want to be like him. And that you can see that, is the part of the foundation of who Superman is. It's not just that he's a Kansas farm boy grown up, with those ethics. It's he grew up with Jonathan Kent as his role model.
It was season 5, by the way. Season 5 was the season that he passed on.
Okay, season 5. Okay, good. Thanks.
It was also the season where Tom Wopat came on and they did Bo and Luke again.
That was great. It's interesting how, even really early on, but increasingly in the series, and they've really started emphasizing this, is how Clark, in turn, has become this incredible source of inspiration for everyone around him, just like his father was his big inspiration. You were just talking about the speech that he gives Jonathan on Earth 2, or whatever it was, Earth X, or whatever, that he's able to turn around and inspire his own father, is another example of Clark coming into his own and slowly becoming the character that we all know.
It's one of the things that I really enjoy about Smallville is that it's one of those shows that, for me, you mentioned that the whole sequence in that Earth 2 with Jonathan said son, and all that bit made me melt. I love how this show brings in like a concept of family values with these characters, and it never feels cheesy. Like, it just feels very natural, and you admire it, and you're like, wow, it's either you connect with certain people in your life that have been important to you, but yet you sit there and say, it also inspires you to say, I want to be that kind of person, that inspirational person to somebody. I think that's a cool thing about the show, because that's a very today concept as well. Because this is a concept, when you think about the concept of Jonathan and Martha and what they brought to Superman, it's been around since forever. And yet, talk about something that we talked about, the adaptability of Batman earlier, the adaptability of Superman and his family to be able to make that work and feel very today. Like, there's nothing that feels dated about it. The messages and values that are instilled on the show, they feel very today. They've encountered the difficulties that a teenager would have faced today, straight on through into adulthood. And I love that throughout any of that, it never comes off as preachy. It never comes off as unrealistic. It just works. And that's something that I think is very hard to capture in a program, to the point where you care about them.
It's an interesting show. Sometimes stuff doesn't work, and sometimes it's kind of hokey or geeky or dorky, but, it still works. It keeps working. Occasionally it staggers, but it's never fallen, really. And it's actually something I think I'll be able to watch with my kids when they're a little bit older. They're a little bit young now still, because occasionally there's somebody will be run through with a jagged piece of metal or something. But I look forward to being able to watch it with my kids in a few years.
I think it's great that the show's going to be bookended, because I think it is going to be something that you can go back and watch all the way through and enjoy. Because I have all the seasons, and I'm going to be excited to go back through and rewatch everything for just that reason.
Let's do the marathon.
The marathon.
Beginning to end, non-stop Smallville, all 10 seasons.
That would be...
No sleeping, too?
22 hours with minus 15 minutes each episode. Let's see, it's about 18 hours per season times 10. That's 180 hours. Good night, Tessa.
The scary dance is worse than the happy dance. And the happy dance was pretty bad.
I haven't read, I'm not sure if I read this as a rumor or if it's for sure or not. Is Michael Rosenbaum coming back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There's 2 more episodes and then the finale.
Yeah.
And he's on for the 2-hour finale. This week there was a commercial in between the 2 episodes where they showed him.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay.
Yeah.
I've actually, you were talking about the teasers where you see him in the cape. I've actually also liked the ones where you see the Smallville logo and there's little flashbacks to things that have happened throughout the 10 years of the series. Little quotes and stuff.
Yeah. And then it ends with the believe, and you see the big red S with the Superman symbol. Yeah. That's another one where I'm like, yay! I see those and I just like, yee!
It shows that the people creating the show realize that the people that are watching now have been around for 10 seasons, or for the most part, and that this series is something that is ending is bittersweet. Like, I'm sad this is ending, because I think the last 2 seasons in particular have stepped it up a notch,
big time.
It's a show that I think is ending on a crescendo. Where it's going to just I think the heights that we always hoped it would go to, but never thought it would be able to. Because timing-wise, we'd never get to this.
I was reminded recently of one of my favorite scenes or sequences from this was a few seasons ago. I think it was season 7. But the episode where Lex kills Lionel.
Yeah.
And there's this great moment when Lex has come downstairs and he's out on the street, and there's, a crowd and police cars and police cordon. And then Clark arrives. And they're on either side of this crowd and then police and the cars and the tape, that's like yellow and black tape. And their eyes lock, and they're both walking parallel to each other on either side of this mess. And they're just looking at each other. And each of them knows what the other one is thinking, basically. And it was just this really neat moment that I thought really defined that relationship and would extend into their relationship, as Lex Luthor and Superman.
I loved the friendship of the 2 characters when they had that on the show. And I think that's why it's so pivotally important that Michael Rosenbaum is back at the end. And I'm so glad they're working that out, because I think, when you talk about watching the show in the future with a family member, being able to watch this all the way through and seeing the development of that relationship and being able to obviously I think that episode's going to be about closure, really showing where that friendship has gone between the 2 and how they are now these forever going to be these adversaries due to different philosophies. I think we're going to really see in those 2 hours how different Clark is now from the guy that he was when they were friends.
Yeah, I remember initially when I first heard about this show, I thought it was a dumb idea. Okay, all these people are going to be friends in high school. Clark and Lex know each other in high school, and they're friends in Smallville. That just seemed dumb to me. But I watched the first episode or two, and I remember my wife and I saw a commercial for it or a preview, and we were like, that looks really good. It's a tribute to the writers and the actors, how they were able to mess around with that friendship and yet enemies, but they're friends. And Lex wants to be liked. There was obviously a stage there where Lex really would have preferred to leave his father behind and just absorb himself into the Kent family. But it just didn't work out. They were able to really work on that relationship and that friendship and that struggle and those ideological differences, and Clark's keeping secrets, and Lex holds that against him, and it's a relationship again that had a lot of permutations, and they did a lot with it. It was too bad that he left the show, but at the same time, I like Tess. I think that they've done a lot of neat things with her too, so it's worked out well, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. I always sit back and I think about that scene from earlier, I think probably season 1, where Lex and Clark are talking, and it's like Lexus looks at him, Clark, our friendship will be a thing of legends. And that's even one of the clips they flash when they're showing the different scenes from the different seasons. And I always just, that was probably my first geek out fanboy moment when he had that line, like, oh yeah. And I really just loved where it went from there. And this is you mentioned bittersweet. This is going to be a tough one for me. When Next Generation ended, I had a hard time because I so loved Next Generation. I loved those characters and where they were going, and even though they were going to go on to the big screen, I was still going to miss that weekly episode. And same thing, Smallville. This is going to be a tough one for me.
That's a sign that they're ending at the right time, though. Because you should feel like that with the closure. You shouldn't feel like it's about time. Because some shows do, where you feel like in the last season you're like, they just went a little too long. Like, right. I'm with you. I'm not taking anything away from you. I'm actually in the same position. I told my wife, really? We've only got a couple more episodes in the finale? It's like, it's getting so good. Honestly, that's why does it have rewatchability? Because by the end of the 10th season, we're still going to feel that way. And I think that's a good move.
Well, and they have the advantage of being able to build to an obvious sort of predetermined crescendo. Although certainly they've been going about it in interesting ways, but there's like a point that they obviously have to reach, and they can work around that and construct it. And they've been constructing at that moment for at least a whole season now.
I like that we don't know what it's going to look like.
Yeah. I know, that's great.
Well, what if they go with the Sopranos ending, where right as the final battle's about to be won, it goes to black? You're like, no! What happened?
Yeah, I'm worried that we won't see him in the costume for very long. It might just be a flash. It might just be him flying off in the costume. I don't know. It's.
I'm thinking more and more we're going to get him in full costume, but I think we're going to see it.
You know what, though? Do you have an issue, though, if the 2 hours are about why he would wear that costume?
Well, they're already sort of working on that, like why the costume, why that costume, why this, why that.
For me, it doesn't have to end with him in the costume, but I do want, at minimum, my ideal would be him in the costume, him fighting in the costume, him, like the second half of the episode, he's in costume and doing his deeds. But I would actually be okay even with if the final scene was, just him opening up the shirt and you see the big symbol. But I do want to see him just in costume, just as you mentioned, the book ending, just to have that final, we have the beginning and now we have the end of him actually being named Superman. Him being Superman, seeing Lois write the article about my interview with Superman, and just have those moments that I'd want to see them.
Well, see, I think what we're going to get, though, for sure, and I'm not saying that we're not going to get him in a fight during that episode. So don't get me wrong there. I see that as a definite possibility. But I'm seeing the other possibility being, and I really like how they're doing this, and I think it's, to me, it's a preference. You very rarely see it explored as to why it's so important that he has a public persona. And they're really showcasing that in this. We see with the Booster Gold episode. I thought that episode was brilliant because you saw Booster had this public persona, and it was horrible. And it was really cheapening the whole superhero thing. I liked how Clark is looking at that and saying, it's really important for me to be able to have a public face. This whole dark side and apocalypse thing really showcased the idea that the heroes remain hidden, all of them. And there's nobody to be that figurehead, nobody to be that accessible one that people can really look up to and believe in. People are going to be suspicious of them and what they do and why they do it. Superman is the DC character, and this is what this is really establishing, that makes it possible for there to be a Batman.
Right.
You know, because he is that guy that people can look up to and say, I believe in this guy. And this series is really going out of its way to establish that. And whether they have him in a full-blown battle in the costume or not, by the end of this series, I guarantee you we're going to see him in a suit. Yeah. There's got to be at this point, because we've already seen Martha gave him the suit. I think we're going to see the reason why it's so important that he puts on that suit, though. And I think that's something that's really fresh, and it being established this much in a Superman series.
Mm-hmm. I want as much as they can show us and have it look really good. You know, I don't want him in the costume in a big prolonged fight unless they've got the budget to make it look really good.
Yeah, and I'll take a static shot of him at the end, you know, or a fly around like, you know, Christopher Reeve did or all that, if that's what they're going to do with it. As long, I want to feel like at the end, I'm like, yes, this whole development as far as why he's going to be there makes total sense to me. I do think we're going to see the costume in the last episode. I will be in shock if we don't at this point, which is funny. If you had asked me last season or even at the beginning of the season, I was 50-50 on that. Now I'm convinced there's no way we're not seeing that suit. I mean, I think the shadows that you're talking about in the ad and all that, I think they're, you know, telling everybody, hey, it's coming.
Well, they're going to get a lot of people watching, which makes me think that maybe we will see it, because if you're trying to attract all those viewers are going to want to see Superman, you know? Yeah.
I definitely think so.
Yeah, that's just a few weeks away, right? They've got, what? Yeah.
There's two more, and then the finale.
Is there going to be another break?
No,
it's running through.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so
we're getting down near the end of the
It's really 3 weeks more of Smallville, and that's it.
Oh, my gosh. Yep, that's great. I'm really struck by when we were talking about the speech that Clark gives the Earth to Jonathan. I was reminded of how we were talking about how Clark, you know, on the show is this inspiration to everyone around him, even though he's not even Superman yet. It's just his integrity and his commitment to these high ideals. Every once in a while, I'm reminded of why I read comic books and why I love superheroes. I watched my kids for the first time Superman Returns. I went to see it when it came out, and I mostly liked it, although I had some of the same complaints, you know, that some people have had with it. But I watched it with my kids, and it's interesting to watch a movie like that has some flaws, but watching it with children, and as a result, to some degree, through the eyes of the child. And that is not a bad movie. It's actually a pretty darn good movie. And I was reminded of how I'm really struck by how, you know, we as human beings and as comic book readers, we keep retelling and keep rereading or revisiting these stories about these like larger than life heroes. And I think it's really neat that we want to believe in them. I think that that's a really neat thing.
I think it's great that a new generation, too, when you talk about through the eyes of a child, that gets me excited for films a lot of times in a way that maybe I wasn't the first time through. Like to see a child with the enthusiasm and not having to be bogged down with this was wrong, that was wrong, and all that.
Right.
They tend to see everything that was right because they don't know the continuity. They don't know the background, all that. And they tend to see it at the core for what it really was meant to be.
Right, yeah.
Because kids are very critical.
Kids understand drama really instinctively. And if a story is good, then they will enjoy it. Even if it has some, you know, flaws or the pacing's a little bit weird here and there, if the story overall is strong, then they will love it.
We were talking about Smallville. You mentioned Tess Mercer before and the development of that character. And it was something in that Clark Luthor episode, I really enjoyed the portrayal of her being drawn to Clark Luthor, even though, she was repulsed by him, but also having that facet of her that genuinely was drawn to him because she has this subconscious desire to be with our Clark. And seeing this would be her only opportunity to actually be with a version of Clark. And that everyone has this dark side, and Tess has been surrounded by it her entire life. Her introduction, she was very much that character. And I love that she lives constantly with trying to move past it and trying to be something more than she was before. A lot of that due to her relationship with Clark. I think she's a very compelling character who, it was funny, when she first came in, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a watered-down Lex Luthor. And she's becomes so much more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's the writers, and also I think the actress has done a good job with the character and carrying that character and making it work. Yeah, I was really dubious too, but she's worked out to be a really interesting character. I don't think that she's as strong this season as she has been in previous seasons, but maybe I think it's because she doesn't have quite as much to do. Last season there was a whole thing with Zod, right?
Yes.
And that heavily involved her. I think that probably not be seeing a whole lot of her, although we still have this Lionel thing that has to be resolved.
Well, we got Zod next week.
Yeah, we got Zod next week.
So we've almost got to see Tess if we're having Zod next. I hope.
Oh, I didn't see that. See, I didn't see the commercials or the trailers at all. I just went right through it. So Zod's coming back, huh?
Well, and I don't know how that's going to. It's interesting. I don't know.
I think the Zod are we getting the
real Zod?
I think we're getting the real Zod.
Oh, from the because it's coming from the Phantom Zone.
Yeah, this is. I don't think this is the Zod we had before they got sent away to wherever they got sent away to.
The Phantom Zone, wasn't it?
I didn't think they went to the Phantom Zone. I thought they went somewhere else.
I can't remember.
Wow. I guess I naturally took it that it was. That'll be interesting to see who it is.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if it's real Zod or if it's the other Zod or where this goes. Because
I wasn't really big on that storyline last year about the Zod thing. I think it kind of floundered around for a while, and I don't think it really worked, at least for me. But I'm perfectly happy to see what they can do with them one more time.
I was glad to see a Jor-El clone, though. I liked seeing Clark have some interaction with his real dad. I thought that was an interesting choice, because I didn't see them going there ever on the show, where we actually got to see him with a quote-unquote version of Jor-El. And it actually softened him in some ways, too.
The Jor-El, that computer Jor-El.
Yeah. Right. Because we've seen him in the comics have interactions with Jor-El, through time travel and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool to see it on Smallville.
Yeah. They've certainly covered a lot of ground.
One other thing that in the last couple of weeks I'd like to touch on is Blue Beetle. Because I thought it was a character that I wish there was still a solo comic for Blue Beetle, because I think he's a character that worked very well on the live-action screen. I think today's technology really showcased how a character like the Scarab climbing up his back, how horrifying that can be, yet how there was something still super cool about his suit.
I was struck by how Iron Man-like the suit was. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way or a derivative way, but it was reminiscent of the way the armor looked was reminiscent of Iron Man's armor in the Iron Man movies.
And I think one of the reasons why that comparison works is I think it's another example of a character like Iron Man. I was glad to see a live-action Iron Man wait until now, because I think the technology's there to do it right. And I think that's another great example of where, our special effects allow there to be a really cool, believable Iron Man with all the cool things where the Iron Man, one of the cool things about Iron Man has always been that his suit can go into a briefcase. And yet is very believable that this thing can just kind of pop on him and increase in size and cover his whole body and have all these weapons and armaments and things like that. Yet it fits into a briefcase.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's...
Yep.
We always believed that in the comics, and it always somehow worked. And I always remember, the old yellow and red armor in the comics with Tony Stark. I always liked that aspect of it. Like, he can be Iron Man anywhere. Look at that. He pulls out his suit and magically everything just kind of works. And we believe that tech exists. And,
sure.
and they make it work on film. And I think that's what works with the blue. There's a little tiny scarab that burrows into this kid's body. And all of a sudden this whole suit that like is sentient and can talk to him, and is something that he actually had to battle for control of. And it was this whole thing, about heroic inspiration and what would drive you. It's the man, not the suit. It's so cool to see those moments with the character. And I think you're right, Art. I think it is something where today's technology has allowed some of these characters that maybe wouldn't have worked as well previously to really become characters that are just really amazingly well developed on the screen on both the Marvel and the DC end. They work now. It's
a great time, I think, to be a fan of superhero comic books because, like you say, the technology has gotten to a point where you can really realize any of these characters now and do them justice.
One other thing that works with this, too, I like in both cases that the technology doesn't overtake acting and storytelling. Because the Iron Man movies, what worked for them for me has been, I really like Tony Stark. I think the character's fantastic. He's compelling to watch. I want to root for him. And if it's all about like this incredible technology with the Iron Man suit and all that, and you don't have a good story there, it doesn't work. I thought it was really cool with Blue Beetle. The story arc with the kid made me really believe that he was in this terrifying situation, and I wanted to see him overcome it. And you wanted to see Booster get some because of the way he dismissed the kid when the kid was coming to him for help. Yeah. It was a really cool arc, and seeing him bullied and Lois trying to help him. He, in that little interaction with Blue Beetle, his story arc affected a number of our main players on that episode in a way that I thought added to their story and made you compassionate for them and yet made you compassionate for him at the same time. It was cool.
Yeah, I thought that they did a really good job on that episode of introducing and using Booster Gold and Blue Beetle and using them in a way that did justice to those characters and introduce the concepts of those characters really well, like we were talking earlier. And at the same time, they contributed or continued to feed into the story that we're being told about Clark and about how he becomes Superman and why.
I liked when Clark looked at the kid. Lois was saying, that's what you need to act like. And Clark's like, do you know how many years I tried? I was like that in Smallville. And that's one of the great things that works about this being around for 10 seasons. He was like that in Smallville. He went through a lot of that. And for him to say, I got to go back to that. I've got to deliberately go back to that. And who would want to? And I loved that because that was very real to me. And I really liked that. And it was a cool way to take this episode and say, this isn't just some bam, okay, we've got this big storyline with Superman developing his identity, but we're going to do Booster and Blue Beetle here, and it's going to take us out of that story, and we'll bring it back the following episode. I think that was really important that episode felt like it was a part of the larger arc, and it really did that seamlessly while introducing two very cool DC characters.
Yeah, it was really well executed episode.
The only other thing I want to mention, and then we can kind of wrap this part up, the selling of the farm bit over there was something. I loved seeing how it was something that was not only, you would imagine that it would be important to Clark, and that Clark would have reservations about selling it. And I love that Clark voiced that, saying, I didn't call the realtor, I didn't want to be, it was hard for me to let go of the farm. This is so much of me, so much, I feel I would lose my identity if I give this up. And Lois telling him I would never let that happen. But Lois also, because of her upbringing and not really having a home, this being something that has become very important to her, the Kent farm. Yeah. And how, she's felt like this is her home as well, to the point where she's trying to sabotage the realtor. I thought that was fantastic.
That was funny. That was a funny sequence.
And again, it was a great example of where it didn't take anything away from the strength that I see in the Lois Lane character, but those moments where we get to see a little vulnerability, a little humanity from her, is something I think that has been great about that character development with Lois Lane. I just think that was a home run again with Erica Durance, and I think my respect level for her as an actress has just risen throughout this series.
Yeah, she's great. She's really done the character justice. A little bit earlier, we were talking about Iron Man, and I was reminded of having a conversation with some friends a while back, and one of the things, and this applies to, upcoming DC movies too, but I I was really struck with Iron Man with how they chose to cast an actor who wasn't in his 20s. They went with an older actor. I think when they cast Robert Downey Jr., he was 42, I think. Now, granted, that's a character that's easier to get away with that with. But I was impressed. It seems like the studios or Hollywood or, whoever is starting to understand that they have to treat this material, these comic book adaptations, with respect, or else you screw them up. And the fact that Marvel hadn't the wherewithal to take the bold step of casting an older actor in, as the lead in a superhero movie, I think is a good sign.
And it was funny too because, and it's testament to Robert Downey Jr. I think he looks, it's for 42, he looks young and fresh and exciting and like he looks like a jet setter. He plays that part of like, I've got money and these are my toys, and he makes it cool to be Iron Man. I mean, and yet it also brings in the demons that Tony Stark faces. And there's an interesting balance that has to go on with that character, because you don't want it to be so dark that Tony's unlikable. You've got to show that Tony has demons, he's fighting a lot of battles of his own, yet at the same time, you want to, at the end, be rooting for Iron Man. And that's great casting where you've captured that as well.
It occurs to me that you could make a Batman movie and cast an actor in that age range as Batman. You don't have to have Batman be, the 30-year-old. You could cast a 45-year-old actor in that role. I mean, it would have to be somebody, obviously, that can play the part. But that's an example of a DC character who doesn't have to be a guy in his 20s,
It also depends on the story you're telling with that character.
Yeah.
I think, you can...
You do the established Batman, you can go with a little bit older Bruce Wayne with the, so he has that maturity, but he also still has, the realistic ability to still go. And that's the key. You need that combination of the, hey, I am Bruce Wayne and I am Batman. You need those two elements, to come together. And if you're going to go a mature Bruce Wayne, you got to go with an established Batman and tell the other stuff in flashbacks.
You went from happy dance to scary dance seamlessly.
It's all the personalities inside my head.
I'm trying to think now, like, what other DC characters you could cast an older actor in.
Hal Jordan, I think you can get away with, because he's done the bits where he's had like the white hair on the side and stuff like that. I mean, where he was possessed by parallax. Well, they say now that he was possessed by parallax, but it was really a decision at the time to age him a bit. There's most of the characters, depending on the story, like Superman, you could cast. Oh yeah. If you're doing an established Superman who's been around for a while, you could establish an older actor as Superman. Do somebody in their 40s, and just he's the more mature, definitive. I'm Superman.
Ollie very easily.
Oh yeah. You could cast an older actor as Green Arrow. Yeah. Just an old grizzly, not grizzly, grizzled, vet kind of character.
One last Smallville question I have for you guys. Yeah. We've seen a lot of characters from DC Smallvilleized. Is there one that, because now I think we can pretty much establish now we've seen them all, right? Is there one that you wish had wound up? I mean, and aside from the obvious ones like Batman and Wonder Woman, because obviously we all want that. Yeah. But is there somebody on Smallville that you wished they had done on Smallville?
Well, I'm a big Adam Strange fan. I think that might have been interesting.
Yeah.
Although you wouldn't have, just because of their budget, you wouldn't have been able to have him fight a giant monster.
That would have been cool, though, having Zeta beam in and all that.
Yeah, could have Zeta beamed in and then just alien. And Clark be like, aliens? Like, what? You think Krypton's the only planet?
Alien world out there? The advantage you have with a character like that is he doesn't have any superpowers. He has a gun, but that's it. And a gun and a jetpack.
Last season would have been a good season to do like somebody like an Adam Strange 2, with the Zod thing going on. Oh, and the fact that you had aliens on Earth, maybe having Clark Zeta beamed to another world. and showing it as just as a way for him to understand races that aren't human, aren't on Earth.
I always would have liked to have seen Green Lantern, have Hal be on Earth, and have Hal already have his ring, but he's just kind of undercover, where he's not being openly out there as Green Lantern, but he's just checking out the scene, seeing what's going on, and the strange occurrence that's going on in this small Kansas town. He's like, I got to investigate this, and then finding out that there's Kryptonian there, and you would know that through the ring, and just this whole kind of play out, and wouldn't even had to Smallville-ize the Green Lantern costume. You could have had just a moment where it's this some energy beam is holding up a collapsing mine or something, and it just you wouldn't even had to completely go all out with the ring, but you still could have had real cool Hal Jordan, Clark Kent moments.
It's funny. I was thinking Alan Scott.
Alan Scott, yeah.
With the JSA episode,
Yeah.
that would have been one. I think there was a perfect opportunity, and I'm guessing because of the development of the Green Lantern movie,
Yeah.
was a reason they're like, let's not.
Yeah, don't confuse people.
Yeah, but I really think that his story would have been different enough that it would have been cool to bring him into Smallville and have him a part of it. But I think it was probably one of those characters that you can't touch him right now.
Probably.
Because by that point, they would have been enough into development of Green Lantern.
My first instinct was to say the Doom Patrol, but I suspect the special effects of that might have been too expensive.
That'd be a tough one.
Yeah, with Robot Man, it's hard to pull that off. Anyway.
I would have loved to have seen that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been awesome.
And they're quirky enough to fit into Smallville really easily.
Yeah, Robot Man would have been the only real problem in terms of special effects. How do you make that look good? I don't know. Although now, I'm looking forward to the day when motion capture technology is ubiquitous enough that we can use it on TV shows and do stuff like Robot Man and have it not be a guy in a robot costume.
I think I think video gaming is making that a lot closer to reality. I think when you get whatever the next generation systems, which I know it's probably be a few years off, but when those next generation systems hit and the graphics chips are now to the next level, I think we're going to see that technology is, because they're using motion capture in games right now. Right. So I think that technology is just going to then affect film. And I think films like Avatar and stuff like that have shown the crazy things you can do nowadays with CGI effects and stuff like that. So you're right, though. The only cost there, Art, is budget. Can we fit that into our budget and use the kind of, because I think the technology is there. It's just, can you put it in the budget?
Right. Yeah. Good point. A TV budget it's amazing that they're able to pull off the special effects that they do pull off on Smallville, and it usually looks good.
Yeah, you know what? You mentioned earlier about how the show has had some missteps and stuff like that along the way. But it's funny, as a whole, when you look at the thing for 10 seasons, it's done so much more right than it's ever done wrong, at least in my eyes. I think it's just, the casting, I think, has been brilliant. The only part I've had any weak areas has been, beginning of the season's always been great, end of the season's always been great. Sometimes in the middle, it seems like the arc, they weren't quite sure how to extend it out through the middle of the season.
Right.
And you get some of those episodes that are isolated that don't seem to fit into the arc, but I think that's even improved as the seasons have gone on.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think I noticed earlier this season that there were a couple episodes that were like, they're just moving the plot along here. The characters aren't really doing anything. That kind of thing.
They were fill-in issues.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Inventory stories.
Yeah, there you go. So it's very comic booky.
Fine.
That's funny. Well, Art, I want to thank you for once again giving us an amazing amount of episodes.
4 hours.
Yeah.
4 hours. Jeez.
Well, no, it's been what? We did an hour and 40 on the first part, another close to an hour and 40 on this part. So yeah, wow.
We're gluttons for punishment.
But once again, I want to remind everyone to check out artlyonart.com, but most importantly, to check out your upcoming work. And
yeah, I need to update my website, actually. I just wrote myself a note. Update website.
It's been a consistent, we talk about consistency. Every one of your projects since we've known you that I've been privileged to pick up, whether it's been work that you've done for IDW, around DC, anywhere around comics, Marvel, I've really genuinely enjoyed your take on a variety of different characters, a variety of different storytelling types, so I'm looking very forward to your upcoming work this summer.
Me too. I'm excited about a bunch of stuff, so yeah.
Nothing like the handy-dandy electro claw for carving through metal doors.
We started to talk about a lot of this controversy surrounding Action Comics 900, and particularly the David Goyer story, The Incident. which is contained within there. And this is really something, how can you pass talking about this? The main premise of the story is Superman gets involved with an international incident, and it leads him to renounce his citizenship. And I think we have to obviously talk about the story in order to set a context for how this happens and how we feel about it. But what are your impressions now? You and I started having a healthy debate last night. I'm very curious to see, before we even kind of dive into this, what are your impressions now on this?
Okay, well, first off, this story is an exact reason why I do multiple readings before I get into discussions, because my initial reaction, to this story, the first one, I only had one read through. There's some points that are still similar, but there's some points that are dramatically different. As I first began reading the story, I was actually enjoying it. I like seeing Superman, embody a peaceful demonstration, doing the kind of the Gandhi and Dr. King, how you look not just for, violence, but just that non-responsive, that peaceful demonstration and just the strength that could have. And I thought that was just a really cool moment, seeing him stand there no matter what they threw at him, no moving, no talking, no nothing, and just standing as just this virtue of peace. And I love that. And I was like, man, this is a cool story. And then I completely got shocked by the whole, when it went into the renouncing of his citizenship. And that shock quickly turned to anger. And I mean, it was true anger, real emotional response. And the shock, the anger didn't come from him saying he was renouncing his U.S. citizenship. That was shock. The anger came from that follow-up statement that he made, that he is an alien and can't help but see the bigger picture. You see, I read that section right there as an anti-America statement. To me, it was as if Superman was saying that we as Americans do not look beyond our own instance, and we do not think about what is good for the world. And it just, I pulled that up and I was reading it, and I was finding I was reading Superman with a kind of a smarmy voice, and then I started looking at other stuff that had happened before that with the paranoid government operatives, the snipers with the kryptonite rounds, and then the fact that you have this government bureaucrat in there talking about showboating, and then Soup came back with, well, it wasn't showboating. I got this, I kept reading Superman with a smarmy voice, and it was making me angry. And I was getting really just mad, because in my head, I literally was seeing, Superman do all this stuff that really annoys me about some TV movie characters, people in the media who cop like a holier-than-thou attitude, like, I know what's best for the world. And I actually was having that kind of voice going through my head with Superman. And I was just like, I'm sitting there fuming. And then when you and I had our initial talk, I'm sitting there and you're like, yeah, that was a really great story. I'm like, oh, we were on the phone, so you couldn't see my face. I was sitting there staring at the phone going, what the hell, are you mental? And
honestly, we need to talk about how I read this story, because your reading with this story is completely different. Because this incident where Superman flies in, you and I had a very similar reaction in the beginning to it. It's cool to see Superman interacting with the government and all that. Especially on my second read-through, I started to see the government agents sitting there. Now, you got to keep in mind, this is Superman, godlike powers. This is a guy who previously has had a very strong tie to our government, in the sense that there's been a good working relationship there. Now, all of a sudden, he's going and acting on his own in this warlike situation. And we know nowadays, timeliness-wise, the Middle East and foreign countries over there, the U.S. is very tentatively making steps as far as which incidents do we get involved in, which sides do we take, why, and what actions do we take, because it represents a country. We're representing a whole people. We're representing an ideology. But we are also representing a force of armed forces. So Superman goes into these countries and makes a stand as a representative of the United States government and forces an international incident. He could be pushing us into there. So the government's looking at, what are you doing? What position are you putting us in? And I'm like, I really totally get this. And with what Superman was going through in things like New Krypton and stuff like that, where, he was connecting with his people. He comes back, he's doing this walkabout in Grounded, where he's trying to say, how can I do more? How can I be more of a symbol for the world? Here's a guy who's sitting here saying, as I was flying away, I stood there, and it was all peaceful. I stood there the whole time. Some people on the opposition were throwing Molotov cocktails at me. Some people were throwing flowers. He said it was a variety of emotions that were going on. But the whole time, I just stood there as a symbol. And meaning not just that he was a symbol, he was there in solidarity with these people who he believed in what they were doing in their peaceful demonstration. But the part that really struck him when he's having this conversation with the guy from the U.S. government, this guy's saying, hey, I understand what you're saying, but you are there and people are looking at you as a representative of the United States government, which I think is something we've all seen him as from time to time. I think even more so in the past, especially in like Silver Age storytelling and Golden Age storytelling and beyond, especially we're dealing with things like the Cold War and things like that. It was very popular in comics to see heroes taking more of a, national U.S. stand. Nowadays, he's sitting there saying, but is that really the role I should be taking? And am I being responsible to the government by having that citizenship? Because he has to think about that responsibility, too. If Superman's going to be flying over and doing stuff like this, that could be construed as an American stand. He is now putting our government in a position where they're being labeled as, look what America's doing at this incident. They took this side. And it wasn't America, it was Superman who took that side. So I'm like, I get what he's doing. Now, you might totally think I'm nuts and bunk for saying that, but that was the reaction I got from the story. And I'm like, wow, what a position to be in of responsibility for Superman. And I actually am very curious to your reaction because I do think this is a story that can be read a variety of different ways. So I don't think my experience with it is, this is the solid set. This was my experience with the story based on my beliefs and my feelings. That doesn't mean that I'm necessarily right for everybody. Where are you at now with it, and how do you see it as you were going along?
Okay, so now that was my first reaction. That was the first read-through. And I, as I said, I was very angry. I was just, and it was more of, I was seeing the traits that I hate in real life with various political stuff, with various television, with media outlets who, pick one side or the other and not actually report the news. All these things, I was seeing this in this character that I love so much. And it was funny, after I was talking to you and you're just saying, hey, wow, that was a great story. And I actually, I was like, yeah, we'll talk about this after I get, my second read through or my third read through. Because I'm like, okay, I sat down for my second read through and I literally had to force myself anytime I caught myself using the smarmy voice to stop and reread that section. And I was trying to do just a pure non-emotional reaction. I really had to get that first read through out of my head so I can look at this differently. And it actually, I was kind of even trying to imagine some just the various incarnations of Superman, their voices being applied to it, just so I can have so I didn't get that smarminess. So my second read through really was the palate cleanser of my opinion. It kind of got me back focused, and I could look at this as a story as compared to an emotional reaction. And I still have emotional reactions from it, but now that I'm able to pull the smarminess out of the Superman voice, I'm actually able to read through this, and it's kind of interesting because I have multiple points of interest on this as a reader, and as if I was a living person living in this universe. And I'm looking at this kind of very uniquely. Now, as a reader, I no longer see this as an anti-American statement or an anti-American story, but a really cool look at Superman and what his role in the universe is going to be. So, my anger, you can say, is
Can
gone.
I say something about that real quick?
Sure.
Just because when you and I talked on the phone last night, you brought that up to me, and I didn't go further into it because I'm like, this is really something we should discuss here. As a reader, I never got an anti-American vibe from this story. Like, I never looked at the government people, with the fact that they had the kryptonite bullets. I'm never like, what is our government doing? I totally got what they were doing, and I understood it.
The launching point for me, as I said, was inner voice I was using for Superman when he had that whole section about being an alien and he has to look at things differently. And I'll be honest with you, it probably was the fact that I just cleaned up cat puke when I read this. I was having a really bad day at work, so I was in a really bad place when I read this story. So there's probably a lot of my personal life was affecting the way I was reading this. And actually that's why I was glad I was able to calm down and whitewash that and actually approach this again, and look at it more, and not have, my outside real world affecting what I was reading. Because it really did. And as I said, the main thing was I heard that Smarmy voice, and then I started looking for other stuff in the story. And I was literally hunting for reasons to hate this, for reasons to prove, see, this is why it's an anti-American story. And I was blaming the writer. I was blaming editorial, saying this is,
I never got that vibe at all. That's what's flooring me, was you're saying that. Because, even on when you're talking about Superman's smarminess, I never felt he was smarmy in this. I thought what he was doing, he was posed a question, and a very important philosophical question by this government official who's over there looking at him saying, hey, what are you doing? You are a representative of the United States. And that's how he was looking at him. He's saying, people look at you as our representative. So, if you're going to be doing these things, you are putting us in a position where we are going to have to, like, he was a first responder and basically going down there and saying, okay, this is the U.S.'s stand. And that's forcing a government right now. Look at the situations we're in and how difficult it is with multiple wars that we are involved in right now. In multiple fronts where we've got troops in areas, and how that affects the political climate in our country, affects the worldwide political climate. And the question this guy is basically saying to him is, who are you to do this? And it's a good question. I never took that as a negative. It's something he should be asked. And Superman has to look at this guy and say, I have to be a man of my ideals. And the alien comment, I never took that as him saying, I'm better than you. It's more of I need to be outside of all this. I am outside of all this. I can't be about just one country. I need to be a symbol. And at that moment, at the end of the story, when he says, was it all worth it? Was all of the, grandstanding and flying around and all that, was it all worth it? In the end, when I saw that one soldier hand the flower back to the guy, in that one moment, that second was where Superman got to see himself as a symbol. Did it end the war? No. Will it end the war? No. But it caused two people on opposite sides to have that one peaceful moment. And is that the first building blocks to maybe years down the line a possible change to something like that? Maybe. Maybe I just changed it for those two people. And in that moment, I'm like, wow, what a powerful moment. And I understand what he's doing. And I never took that, though. And this is where you might totally still feel differently than me. And a lot of other people listening to this might still feel that way. And I respect that totally. But for me, I'm just trying to, and I'm going to let you jump back in. But that was one of the things when you said that, I was like, wow, I had 110% an opposite experience from this. And I think it drove why I was like, when Superman did that, I'm like, wow, he lost nothing there for me. If anything, it showed respect to our government, because he can't be doing these things if he's going to put our government in that position. And I thought it was an interesting approach.
Well, it's funny because, just let me just make sure everyone realizes, like with that scene you're talking about, now I look at it and I am agreeing with you how cool that was. But when I was in this negative state of mind, and it really was a pure negative state of mind, I was looking for any reason to further be angry at this story. And as I said, I was seeing him, kind of cop an attitude with the, what's this guy's name? I always keep forgetting, Gabriel Wright. And I kept, seeing him kind of cop an attitude with him, because one of the big criticisms that happen in the real world is whenever the government, whether it's Republican run, Democratic run, either way, whoever is running it does something, if there's not an immediate positive response, there will always be people say, oh, it failed, immediately. And they, you don't recognize that you need to give time. Whether it's a program, whether it's a military conflict, whether it's any type of just action that involves more than 3 people, you need to give it some time to let it build, to let it grow, and actually wait to see the results. And that's something that a lot of people just kind of have. They want that immediate satisfaction now. And when I was reading this, I was seeing this as Superman saying, oh, you're just looking for an immediate reaction now, kind of. And again, he wasn't saying that. I don't see that now. It's, again, I was looking for any negative reason. Now, that final scene, I got to agree with you. Now, when I look at it and I read it, like by the third, fourth read through, I really did enjoy seeing just that moment between the two of them that, maybe only 2 people responded, maybe more than 2 will respond to that. Who knows where this is going to go? This is, a step in the right direction. It's, one person can, make a difference. One regular everyday person on either side of the thing can actually be a gap and a breach in any type of conflict. So that's like that cool thing. But it's funny because I'm sitting there and I do laugh at the way I was looking at it, and it really was just I was under the influence of red kryptonite. Maybe is the only thing I can go with, or I don't know. But there was just this angry, even at that great peaceful moment, I was still seeing red over it, and it's I don't know. I'm kind of babbling a little bit there.
No. It was one of those. I honestly greatly enjoyed talking to you last night about this. Just like Raphael, I'm gonna put on his message in a couple seconds because he called in with a voicemail, and I didn't want to start with that because I didn't want this to start off like I was trying to counter him. And because I feel like if I'm not doing a counterpoint with him, it's not fair to put him in that position. But he has some comments, and I want to add them on to our conversation a little bit more towards the end to kind of give him a fair say without it being a point counter, not giving him a fair opportunity to point counterpoint. On our Facebook, actually the Raging Bullets Facebook page, for anyone who's listening, Raphael and I started having like a really cool debate about this, and it was a lot of point counterpoint, and at the end I really felt we hit a really nice stride where it was kind of we respected what we both found in common, and we respected each other's differences in the approach on this story. So I don't really want to represent that here because I don't think I'll do it justice, other than to say go check it out on that page. But I do think this is a story that's going to impact people in a variety of different ways. Now
we still got you and I still are going to have some disagreements on some stuff because there's a couple points that I know you think one way and I'm thinking another way. Now,
go for it.
As a reader. As a comic book reader, I'm agreeing with you about the whole where this story arc is going. This is going to be a really cool Superman story, and it has the potential to be a really cool Superman story.
Here's the thing. Wait, let's clarify this first. How far is this going to go? Is it going to go anywhere?
Right.
This is something where it could have been just done in the context of a cool story that represents a lot of what we've seen going on with him since New Krypton and since Grounded, because it does bring in elements of everything he was going through, where in New Krypton he got a chance to embrace his people. This is a guy who, for the first time got to, and this is a lot of the stuff that Bruce addresses with him when the two of them start having their chat in Grounded later on. It was kind of a nice culmination of leading to this point. And this is not the story is not grounded. It's something that I think echoes a lot of what's going on in Superman's world, but it's not a part of Grounded per se. It's an isolated story. So whether or not this was actually intended to be the direction from Superman is going to be interesting to see. Where does this go? Do you feel, and that's something I want to ask you on this, because it's a point I want to make sure we don't leave with, do you feel this somehow has changed the core of Superman, this decision?
Well, here's the thing. This is one of those situations as a reader or as a person. Now, when I say a person, I mean if I look at the stories a lot of times as if I am a citizen of Metropolis or a citizen of Gotham, and how would I look at Superman if I was a citizen? If I was a citizen sitting in Metropolis and I turn on the TV, Superman's in the UN saying, I renounce my U.S. citizenship, I would be PO'd. I would feel it as a slap in the face. And my initial reaction would be, what, U.S. isn't good enough for you? And I wouldn't be able to look beyond, especially initially. Maybe later on if I heard more from him about it. But my initial reaction, I wouldn't be able to look beyond just that initial gut reaction about, saying, okay, he doesn't want to be a U.S. anymore. Fine. You don't want to be one of us. Get the heck out of here. We'll figure out our own way.
But what if he explains it?
See, that's again...
because our media nowadays, you're telling... wait, think about how our media works. Let's be honest. Superman renounces his citizenship. And we're talking real world now. I'm going to go with you on this one because talking about today. TMZ, CNN, every channel in the world. He's going to be on Good Morning America. He's going to be all over the place. They're going to be trying to get the scoop on this. And whether they interview him directly or they interview Lois Lane or other people who've been in contact with Superman in there, they're going to be all over what are his reasons for doing this. And there's going to be. You're 100% correct. And I think that's interesting. I do want to see that.
Yes. And
I think there needs to be there's going to be that negative spin where people are going to say, what is he doing and all that. But then there's going to be those people that maybe didn't respect Superman before that do respect him now for standing true to, first of all, his morals, his ideals, and what he sees his role is in our world. And at the same time, I think in his explanation, he's going to show that he does have a respect for the U.S. and what he did. Because I do think his actions here show respect for, hey, this is who I need to be now. This is who I need to be to the world. And I can't put you in this position. Because the government is basically looking at him and saying, look what you're doing to us. And they're right to call him to task on this. I actually agree with the government side on this. And that was one of the things I really liked about the story is I didn't see Superman as being smarmy. I agreed with what Superman was doing. And I thought that was the cool part of the story. But I also agreed with the government calling him on it and saying, you are looked at as our representative. And I think we as readers often do look at Superman as that kind of role. Not in the sense that he works for the government or he's been a soldier or something like that, a la like Captain America or something. But I do think he is looked at as a symbol of America. And I think that's something where he needs to say, if I'm going to be taking this kind of active role in the world and in the middle of conflicts, where I could be potentially labeling it as a U.S. stand, I need to let people know that I am acting as an agent of the world, not acting as an agent of the U.S. And he needs to set something publicly. If Lois Lane and Clark Kent don't, get this out there, that this is what Superman's trying to do, and if they don't take advantage of the storytelling that comes from that, I'm talking about in the comics end, I want to see the real world spin on this, Jim. I agree with you on I want to see the real world end of it because I do think stories like what you're talking about with people's reaction like you would have are interesting because Superman's faced that before in his comics. Not everybody's always agreed with Superman. He's given up. He's left the Earth before and given it up. Now, I'm not just talking about a new Krypton. Other stories before where people had to question him in many different ways.
Yeah, and it's also the one other thing I was thinking of is as an actual living person in here, whether when he starts doing the spin doctrine, because as a general rule, I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to whenever someone's doing interviews or whenever we're getting reactions, especially from celebrities and or politicians, if I was living in the real world, anything Superman said beyond that, I would be very skeptical on, and I would be again, it would catch me questioning. That would even be further questioning. So all the stuff you're saying about how he would say this, the yada yada, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm buying this, and I would actually start looking at how does the hero community treat him, because there definitely should be stuff, story arcs of heroes reacting to this, because let's be honest, heroes are regular people as well. So how are they going to deal? How would somebody...
Here's a point where I want to disagree with you. You're acting like the world right now, the real world, if he was on television right now before this incident where he renounced his citizenship, you're acting like people would be embracing him like, dude, those same people that would be skeptical of Superman, if Superman really existed, there would be the same kind of people skeptical of him now.
Right.
Before that. Before he renounced his citizenship, when he was a U.S. citizen. Think about it.
There definitely would be the skeptics, and there definitely would be that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about me as a person. Mm-hmm. Me as a person living in Metropolis, I think there's been enough, of stuff, positive stuff that Superman has done, where I think even I would look beyond the skepticism, and I think I could embrace this guy as someone I would look up to. And then when he drops the "I'm no longer a U.S. citizenship," that would dramatically turn me. And then I would. When he would be, if he then started going on TV, or if Lois started going on TV, or various people speaking on his behalf were going on TV, any of the media outlets, I'm talking about me personally. I would start, that kind of him taking that active approach for me would be very skeptical. And I don't know if that would turn me around.
You got to remember though, he's the one that went before the UN and renounced his citizenship. So. He did that. It wasn't something like that was done by somebody else or they made the announcement. I'm guessing this would be a public address that Superman did. So they're not going to hear it from, they're going to hear it from Superman.
Right. I'm talking
and why?
I'm talking after the Superman address. But after he addresses the UN. The follow-up communication that all the media outlets are looking for. That's what I'm talking about.
But I'm saying in the real world right now. Right. Before all of what you're talking about, if you're right, his every action would be scrutinized by so many people anyway. Our media loves to do that.
Right.
Okay. I guess what I'm saying is I think this is a moot point. In the real world today, I think there would be just as many people scrutinizing Superman before and after he was a U.S. citizen. I'm saying my point is though I'm talking though. I understand you're talking about you, but I'm talking about in general, because if you're talking about you, then you have to look at the public at large, and what is this going to do to him publicly? I don't think it's going to hurt him publicly.
Oh, I think it would.
I think it's going to have. I think it's going to have certain people rise up against him. But we saw in Grounded there were already people that didn't have respect for him as he was traveling all over the place because they felt that he never really got down to the grassroots and got to know people and what their needs were. And I think that's a very true statement of what people would be like. I think there's going to be people that are naturally going to embrace him too because of this. I agree. Let me say this. If Superman was a real person and he really did this, I agree with you to a certain extent. There are going to be some people that are going to turn on him because of this. But then I think there's other people that, to balance it out, are going to embrace him in a way that they never did before because they are going to see him as standing for his ideals, standing for these things that he's always told people he stands for, and not like making himself an agent of the government, a pawn of the government. Pawn's even a strong word because he's not even saying that's what the issue is, as somebody who is held back by his ties to the government, which ultimately they are doing. I'm not saying it's the government's fault. I'm saying his role as a symbol for the United States. If he didn't do you think he was wrong to do what he did? Flying in there.
Oh, flying in there? No. Mm-hmm. I think that was... It was probably not a... I don't even want to say not a well-thought plan, but it's him flying in there. Mm-hmm. I commend what he did and why he did it. But it's you kept saying how you agree with the government. I'm a little bit more on the government side here, where I
said I agree with the government.
Something different. I'm kind of like I don't want to say he did a bad thing, but because peaceful demonstration and support of a peaceful demonstration, I can't really, in good conscience, say that's a bad thing.
Here's the thing, though. I agree with the government, I agree with. Hold on, and I agree with him. And his point is, the government's saying, if you are a symbol of our government, you can't do this. And he's saying, you're right, this is why I have to renounce my citizenship. Because I need to be able to do things like this. I think he's got a larger purpose. Yeah, he's Superman.
And as a reader, I agree with you. I think it's a cool thing.
I'm not talking about as a reader. I'm talking about as a human. I'm saying if this was real, I agree with him.
See, dude,
I love my U.S. citizenship. Let me say that. So I'm not anti. I am very pro-U.S. Don't get me wrong. So I'm not coming at this standpoint like I'm less American than you or anybody else. I'm very pro my country. I love being a part of this country and living here. But I'm looking at Superman. If there was really somebody like that who could sit there, there's a conflict going on. He has the opportunity to fly in there, and on some level, at that moment, he can make a sweeping change. How many lives were saved that day? Just because he was there that day. And maybe it was only for that day. But for that day, look at all the lives he saved. Being there as that symbol. As a moral person, how could he not do that? But he can't do it as a representative of the U.S. because it puts us, our country, in a vulnerable position where we then have to take a stand against that other force or issue statements renouncing what Superman did. How can he do that to our country? He can't. That's why I see both sides of it, and that's why I think it's a very smart story, because I think both sides are right in their presentations and what they're doing. I think that's why the government's sitting there saying, hey, what are you doing? You're not thinking. And I agree with you on that. He wasn't. But it does force him to say and evaluate, like, if I need to be able to do this as a moral person, if this is what my values are all about, if it is about me being a symbol, and it is about me being a force of change and a force, an opportunity to stand here and show solidarity with these people, how can I do that if I'm hampered and limited by my citizenship? I can't be irresponsible to you where I'm forcing you into this position because it's my choice, not yours. Because he didn't consult the government, and when does he? Mm-hmm. Realistically, is Superman a hero who consults the government before he does anything?
No.
So the government, he's not an elected official. Our people did not say, hey, Superman, you are president, you are governor, you are whatever. He is not an elected official, a representative of the United States. He isn't. And yet people view him that way. And the government's saying, you don't understand. People do view you this way. So he needs to issue a statement, either he needs to do one of two things. He either needs to rein himself in and have closer ties to the government where he does answer to them, which hasn't always worked very well in Superman storytelling for him when he has. Or he needs to come forward and say, I am an agent of the world. I am not working for the government. And he needs to do it in a way that lets people know this is no joke. This is a fact. And also has to do it in a way where he's respecting the U.S. when he does it. And saying, this is my home. These are the people that I believe in them. But, I have to look at the larger picture. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. For me, out of this story, what I want to see is I do want to see where it goes. I want to see everything you were talking about, like how does Superman spin this? I don't know if this was ever intended to have this kind of reaction, but to me, my head's spinning with not what happened here, with where it would go from here, because I do believe both sides.
Yeah, and it's, personally, what I think Superman needed to do was stop being such a reluctant leader and just take command.
He did that. This is one of those, in all kidding aside, this is one of those situations where I think he did show leadership.
Yeah, true.
Let me ask you, wait.
That was a pure joke, okay?
Yeah. No, I know that.
So I don't get yelled at by
No. And the reason why I even took it there, though, because for all we joke about our reluctant leader discussion that we had years ago, actually, on the show about Superman, there was a lot of really interesting debate in there as far as how we saw leadership and what that means and what Superman means at that point. One question I really have about this, and I think it's an interesting one, this did come up in Facebook, but I think, we can open this up as a new discussion. The concept of the American way. Truth, justice, and the American way. What does that mean to you? Because I personally don't think that's tied to Superman's citizenship. I see that as being tied to Superman's upbringing. A lot of what we see with Ma and Pa Kent, the things that he's went through from childhood straight on through to his adult life when he began his career. It's more than just the Kansas farm boy, but it is a core set of values that I see Superman symbolizing. But what do you see that as? Because I really love when you talk about this, because I find that and I do think that's something that all of us as readers, whether we agree or disagree with the direction this story went in, I do think one of the commonalities we're all going to have at the end of the day with this story is that we all see truth, justice, and the American way and that concept of Superman similarly. So how do you see that?
Well, for me, in the American way, the truth, justice, and the American way has changed over time, and it's evolved, and different times I've seen it different ways. Right now, currently what I see that is being American way is just the ideology that made this country great. And for me, that's 3 points. 1, hard work will lead to success. 2, the strong must defend the weak. and 3, freedom of choice, be it religion, love, or whatnot. It's that those 3 core concepts, for me, is what is the founding, building blocks that made America what America is.
What were the second and third again?
What?
What were the second and third again?
It's hard work leads to success.
Mm-hmm.
The strong must defend the weak.
What was that again?
The strong must defend the weak.
Okay, keep going.
And freedom of choice. And choice being religion, love, whatnot. Any of that. It's that concept, the freedom that we have.
And see,
that's to me
and the whole. Let me be honest. The reason why I had to repeat that, when you said that, I was like getting chills almost, because I'm like, and that's why I had to repeat it, because I totally see that as Superman's core values. That's who he is to me, and his best. And I thought that's what he did here. And let me clarify one thing too. At the end of this discussion, when it ends, I think listeners are going to have a clear idea how I feel. I think a clear idea how you feel. I think there's like 700 different ways to view this story. And there's no way we are ever going to be able to accurately represent them, because I think they come from a passionate, emotional response inside you. I think it's very clear to anybody listening right now, boy, Sean's really got one take on this. And I do, but I do want to make a point here and say that I respect that this is my take, and somebody listening to this might, I'm hoping people get charged listening to this and maybe reread the story and really kind of explore what their own take really is on this story. Because I do think it's an interesting story that if you read it multiple times, like you said, you're going to get a variety of different take on it. And I agree with you that I think at the end of this, you and I are still going to, I think we have some commonalities here, but I do think we have some ideological differences with this that I think are quite interesting. And I think that makes it a great story.
Oh, yeah. And here's the thing. When I start looking at Superman, and the American way and truth, justice, Candace going forward. Now, for me, I kind of started analyzing this and looking at it different ways. So the first thing I did was I took Superman out of the mix. I went back to the real world, and I was like, say some French guy, over in France is saying this is the American way of life, and he was going to fight to defend it. My first reaction would be, what the hell do you know about America? You're French. I would not, even though he's saying exactly what I just said, I would not still be saying, oh yeah, he's right. I know me. I know that would be my initial reaction. Then also, if you take someone who's
conversely, okay. I'm actually defending your point. And conversely here, I think if I, let's say I gained superpowers, or forget superpowers, I got on television as an American and started saying I'm going to defend, the French way of life or something like that, French people would look at me like, what? You never even been here. So I think your point has mirror images that could be equally said that have nothing to do with. I think you're right. So
yeah, and also then I started looking. Take someone who is a former U.S. citizen and have them say the exact same thing. I would have an equal reaction. I would be like, you chose to leave the U.S., therefore you've waived the right to say that. You've waived your right for that. That's not you. And as I said before, when I was talking about if I was living in the DC universe, I would feel like a slap in the face, if Superman did it. Part of this is coming from this ideology that I have. Now, granted, these two people just exactly echoed what I just said. I still would have an issue with saying, yes, they're right. So when I start looking at this as a person, and with Superman saying he's no longer a citizen, for me, I would have an issue with saying he's fighting for truth, justice, and the American way anymore. Just for those two basic reasons I just mentioned.
Well, he does say it's not enough anymore.
Well,
so he's saying that he's moving beyond that. Not, I don't think he's slapping that in the face though. But I'm sorry, please continue. I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's why it's as I'm sitting there and reading it as a reader, I like where this is going. I like all the possibilities of where this could go, and I hope this is actually in continuity and writers run with this and they actually do something with this, and this isn't just a standalone short story. But as a reader, I would have an issue with them saying Superman still fights for truth, justice, and the American way going forward if he renounces his citizenship. Now, he could say he fights for truth, justice, and freedom, and I'd be like, yeah, that's cool. Or he could come up with something else, complete other ideology. I'd be okay with that.
Or truth, justice, or freedom fries.
Yeah. Hey,
He doesn't. You know what though? When was the last time? Wait, when was the
way.
last time Superman said in the comics he fights for truth, justice, and the American way?
I don't think he has in a very long time.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. But it's something that I would like to see in the comics because of what I believe the American way is. But if they're getting rid of this, if he's getting rid of his citizenship, I don't want him to. I wouldn't want to see it in the comics anymore.
I wouldn't want to see him say it. I think those ideologies, those concepts, are more than just a clever catchphrase. And the reason why I said, how do you see that and what does that mean? And there's a reason why I asked you this. And I 100% agree with you. I don't want to see him saying that because it doesn't make any sense. That'd be like, you're saying what? You're fighting for what? You just renounced your citizenship. It doesn't make any sense. How can you sit there and say that you're renouncing it so you're not tied to America, then you say that? He doesn't really say it, though. I can't remember the last comic where Superman says, and I'm fighting for truth, justice, and the American way. Even in the old 50s, show, he didn't say it. That was said in the beginning opening montage, and that fit the era. I think, though, here's the distinction for me. It has to be that Superman stands for those core values. And what people have been looking for Superman is for Superman to start standing up and doing something again. I think it's one of the things with Grounded. We talked about what are we enjoying about the arc. It's about him reconnecting with the world and, getting to the point where what I wanted to see at the end of Grounded, what I wanted to see starting to see at this point is Superman doing something. And I love Grounded. I'm a fan of Grounded and what was happening there. So that's not a smack on Grounded. It's just the opposite. I looked at it as a building block to Superman redefining himself. Remember, we talked about the Batman issue. What did we hope from that? It's time for Superman now. It's come to the point where Superman needs to move forward. He's taken this journey. Now it's time for us to get Superman being super again, right? Yeah. Well, in this issue, he did this in this moment. And I thought this is a great symbol of what I think are the core values of Superman.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with that on that point. To be honest, this was, as I said, this was a good story. This was a really cool story it has a great opening for future stuff. And again, as a reader, I don't have an issue with him renouncing his citizenship. For all the points you're making about how this is a chance for Superman to do something beyond it. Now, when you're talking about, is it taking away from the icon? Is it taking away from some of these iconic images and beliefs of Superman? It doesn't take away from his core. His core is still rock solid. It's still the exact same thing. But even as I say that, there's still a piece of me that is, a little bit, did you have to get rid of the American way? Did you really have to do that? When he addressed the UN, couldn't the conversation we just had about what what the American way is, couldn't that have been a speech? Couldn't that be, people think the American way is about U.S. doctrine. It's not. It's about this. It's about this. It's about this. The media is saying that I fight for truth, justice, and the American way. So be it. What I stand for is and have him have this moment where he could have very easily separated himself from the government, stated that this is who he is, not use the terms American way, but not take it away either. They could have very easily kept this as part of his core being without getting rid of it. Just a redefining of, well, not even a redefining it, a definitive definition of what the term American way means to Superman. And have him show what, these stuff that we're talking about, that is the core value of Superman, that's the American way. And he could even have said, if you have a problem with saying, thinking of this, and you think I am a symbol of America, then think of me as someone who's fighting for freedom.
Hold on. I'm in the UN, okay? And I'm listening to Superman's spiel about how, hey, I'm redefining myself. I'm still an American citizen, but I'm going to defend the world. I'm going to do this, and this. Let's use your France example, okay? And I'm only, it can be any country. It can be Zimbabwe. Right. It can be whatever. Yeah. It can be, Norgeland or whatever. And they're looking at Superman and saying, but you're a U.S. citizen, so naturally you're going to favor your country of choice. It's whenever there's a conflict that's going to arise, what do we got to deal with? If it's us versus the U.S., Superman is going to stand on the side of the U.S. and do this versus being impartial and taking a fair stand to really help people and really be an agent of change here. So I don't know. I'm seeing this completely differently now, where I'm like, whoa, what are and if he doesn't do that, he's putting the U.S. in an awkward position. And he's now involved in a whole political struggle that the question is, should Superman be involved in that? Or should he be involved in more important things like saving lives, being a symbol for a better way of life, being a symbol for right and wrong, versus being a symbol of politics are dirty. It's not a negative on the U.S. It's a negative all around the world. Yeah, it has to be. There's a lot of bartering and giving and taking in order to keep the peace if you're involved in politics. And it's something politicians have to do. And I get that. And that's out of respect for what a tough job that is. I'd be a horrible politician. I'd be a horrible negotiator with, because there comes points in time where morally you got to sit there and say, what is the right thing for me to do for a country, for a people in that sense? In Superman's case, I don't think Superman should be involved in all that. I think Superman's role should be different. It should be outside that. I think he should be what we should aspire to be. And I think that's something that is at that character's core. Everything you said about him and True Justice in the American Way and how you view that is exactly what I think Superman should be. And I don't think he can do that being involved as a part of the political machine. I don't. I think he needs to be outside it. And
to be honest, I do agree with you, but there's still a piece of me that wishes we didn't lose that. And everything you're saying is completely logical. It makes sense. It's the looking outside beyond this. Knowing what Superman's been through, knowing what Superman's going through, what he wants to do, what his beliefs are. I completely agree with you. But there's still just that piece of me that is holding on to. I wish he hadn't done this.
Now, let me throw out one other piece, because I'm sounding like I'm all a bed of roses, okay? But there is a part of me that's a skeptic on the other side. Now, let me explain that part. There's always a question when you do something like that, was there a point to it? Like, was this done for a reason? We're doing this in comics right now in an anniversary issue of Superman. Now, I think this is, in my opinion, if we're heading in a new status quo for Superman, post-Ground and New Krypton and all that, we are showing this character as Superman's going to take charge now. We're going to see Superman really doing some big things and really being a part of some happenings. We've built to all this from where it was before. This is the crescendo where now we're going to see a new direction. We're going to see him fighting the way that he used to, but also seeing him interacting with the DC universe as a whole in a new way. We see Batman jet-setting around the world, creating, these new Batmen, for the purpose of Batman Inc. and kind of making a world change there and building to defend against something bigger, to be more effective in his role and setting aside a future. Are we going to see Superman doing that? I'm not saying jet setting like Batman does, but I'm saying having a larger impact than we've seen lately on the world at large, doing big things. What we saw here, I think, is an interesting prelude. If nothing's done with this, I'm going to sit there and go, what's the point? You did this and you set up all this. Look at all the stuff you and I both want to see. And there's a lot of commonality. That's one area where even being on opposite sides, because there's certain points here where it's clear. We're still, I don't know if opposite sides is a strong enough word, but we're on different sides, different facets of it. This could be an octagon and maybe you and I are next to each other, sort of. And then in some areas we're a little bit more, bumping around the octagon. But there could be points in time where you and I are beside each other at the table, but not quite next to each other, if that makes sense.
Big time.
And I think this is one of those types of story. But to me, if you're going to do this and set up something that interesting, you have to tell stories involving that, right?
Oh, I hope so. That was the thing I was kind of laughing about when I was getting ready for this discussion. I was thinking, what if this was meant to be just a story in an issue 900, and they were never going to do anything with this?
Dude,
and
that's the ultimate joke.
Thrown out there.
That's the ultimate joke, because this could very well, because this is a David Goyer story. David Goyer's not writing anything monthly right now. Now, it could be, as editorial was working with them on this story, he had this story idea, and they're like, wow, we can do this. Because first of all, David Goyer is a big name, and I really enjoyed David Goyer's writing. I thought this was a very well-written piece. But the question becomes, as you're looking through all these stories that were done, some of these stories were clearly one-offs, like the Legion one and stuff like that. I thought the Legion story was incredibly charming. I loved seeing this opportunity, because you never see that. Superman just getting, because every Legion story with the Superman usually involves Superman being pulled into some kind of crisis with them. This is a chance for him to just hang with the Legion and just be himself. I thought that was cool, without any threat of war or anything.
Yeah, that was a neat thing, and especially I like the lead into that where Lois is going through her desk looking for her Legion ring. Yeah, she's got a Legion ring in that mess. It's not locked up in the Fortress of Solitude. It's right there. Anyone could find it, but who's going to go through Lois Lane's desk? Who's going to rifle through that mess thinking there would be a Legion ring there? I thought that whole bit, that was a really funny story, and it was something I was like, yeah, this is kind of neat. And actually, in a way, it was part of the jarringness of Incident where I had this really fun laugh. Oh, okay, that's kind of nice. And then I go to this one, and I'm like, whoa!
Jim, before we go any further, let me play Raphael's email.
Yeah.
Just so we can get his take brought in, because he kind of talks about how this affects what's just happened now.
Hey, Raging Balutska, this is Raphael Sands. On Sunday, me and Sean was having a very interesting debate about Action Comics 900, and then later on Sunday evening, we find out that Osama bin Laden has been assassinated. And Newsarama has that this is just a case of bad timing. So I'm not going to go into it. I just think that it was bad timing. I mean, DC had no control over it. But as we're all filled with American pride, like I am, I just think that it was a bad decision to have Superman say he's not an American citizen anymore. And I'm not going to get into bashing DC because no one knew that this was going to happen, but as we're all filled with American pride that we're happy that this man has gone down, it was just bad timing to have Superman in the very same week say, I'm not a U.S. citizen anymore. But other than that, me and Sean had a great conversation. It was a great debate about where we thought the story could go. I think we were both on the same side, just we had different opposing views. And I would just want to commend Sean and Jim for the great show that they do. I'm a fan. I'm not really a DC guy. I get my number of DC books, much more of a Marvel Comics fan, and the DC books that I don't pick up, I'm always glad to listen to your show to get the info. It lets me know that there's still good work being done at DC, and I just love your show. So thanks again. Take care.
And actually, I want to kind of share his comments because we had a really nice debate together, and please don't ever be afraid to have that with me. I'm going to get feisty with you, just like I do. I mean, look at the feisty debate we're having here right now between you and me, and you're one of my best friends. So, you're like family. So, I mean, that's going to happen from time to time, but that's fun. I mean, why do we record the show? For these moments. So, I mean, the Facebook chat that he and I were having, that was one of those, wow, this is gold. I mean, his comments led to this segment. Because I'm like, wow, this should be podcasted. So, I mean, yay you, and thank you for the kind words about the podcast, actually. But first of all, I agree with him that it's bad timing in the sense that I think with the fact that it's been announced that Superman renounced his citizenship, I think people who didn't read the story and maybe who aren't looking at the context of what's happening here aren't going to understand what Superman did. Because I don't think he did this out of lack of respect to the U.S. I take it as and that's me, and maybe that's because I've got my own eyes on how I'm seeing this, and I'm seeing this that he's doing this with full respect for our country, not disrespect. But I do, and I think that's where it's an interesting story because I think there is something to be explored there with how would the public in general react to this in comics, the actual citizenship of Metropolis. But I don't take his actions as disrespect. Do you, Jim? I mean, and I'm being honest with you. Do you take his, because you talked about him being smarmy, and that's what's you fascinate me with how you viewed him in this. Do you still think that was his role and goal in this? And it's okay if you do. I'm curious.
No, that as I said, the smarmy and the disrespectful and all of that stuff, that was on the first read through only. And again, I was in a negative state of mind and I was looking for a fight. So that, as I said, I literally had just cleaned up I was cat sitting for my sister. So I'd literally cleaned up, cat puke. I had a really bad day at work, and I'm reading, Action Comics, and I get to that, I'm like, what? And I was just, it was one of those moments where real life and the whole smarmy voice, everything. That was all, first read through. Second read through cleared the palate. Third, fourth, fifth, I really, developed where they're going with this. Now, me as a reader, I don't see him as being disrespectful to the U.S. with this. I don't see it as Superman. And it's the comments you're making about Superman doing this for the U.S. is something I do agree with you on. Now, as I said, if I was a person inside the comic, I wouldn't see that. If
I want to read that.
Yeah, that's what I want to read.
Yes,
those are the kind of stories I want to read. I want to read which superheroes have an issue with Superman now because he did this
and don't know why.
Yeah, because there's got to be a couple people, especially. I'm trying to. It was funny. I was trying to think who may have an issue with it. I think Jon Stewart would have an issue with this. Jon Stewart respects Superman. But when he sees something like this, because John is someone who served his country, who, it's and same thing with Hal. I think Hal will maybe have an issue with this. They both would be one of those conflicted people saying, hey, we know you, Superman. We know what kind of guy you are. What the heck's going on here? And I could see them having issues with him initially over that, and that would be a great conversation between Clark and them explaining why he's doing this, why he must do this. There's a couple other characters I think it would be a very interesting discussion and debate why he's doing this. The original Green Lantern, Alan Scott. And Jay,
Jay
Flash.
Garrick, who's now going to be a public official.
Yeah, I could see both of those characters going, hey, what's going on here, Superman? This is, Wildcat. So the old school, the old guard of the DCU, I could see them having an issue with Superman and saying, hey, you better start explaining yourself, son. So I think that
Although you got to remember, a lot of these guys, look what these guys went through in their history with the government, though. So I think it would be interesting to say, will they or won't they? These are part of the guys that had to unmask or, go underground and just give it up because of things that happen within. So I don't know. I don't know how they will feel. I would be curious to see. And yet they never gave up their love for their country. There's a difference there. So I do think this is an interesting ideological approach. I agree with Raphael in the sense that with what happened with bin Laden and all that, it's bad timing. In the sense that, how could they have known that? Because, you're right. We've got this very pro-American, sentiment that just came on with the death of bin Laden and stuff like that. And I get that. I really do. And I agree with his point there. But taking that out of it, I think this is a very brave story in the sense that I don't think it was done just for the sake of being controversial. I think that the story led to this naturally. I don't feel that this was controversy for the sake of controversy, which sometimes that kind of stuff will happen. I'm going to be sorely. I don't want to see though. I was just going to say I'm going to be sorely disappointed if they don't do something with it. I will be, but I also don't want every issue of Superman now to deal with people questioning him on why he gave up his citizenship. I think we need to see that when the time's right. Like you mentioned a couple of heroes that would be interesting to see address this with him. And I think from time to time that would be interesting, when appropriate. And I do want to see that. And I honestly think something should be done soon as a one-shot single issue or something like that in one of the books just to address that because I think it's timely. You almost have to now because you did this. So I'm hoping somebody has a plan for that because I think that'd be kind of cool to read about. But aside from that, I want to see Superman being Superman. I want to see him showing that this decision that he made, but I want to see him being Superman in a way that shows that this new viewpoint of his is making him more effective. He now has, it's no more of this, I'm not sure of what my role is on Earth or anything like that. Let's get him back to just being Superman,
Yeah.
Worldwide, doing things worldwide as Superman and really taking a stance. And because I don't see Superman being effective and being more of Superman and this being the right choice if Superman's spending all of his days on Good Morning America or dealing with Alan Scott about his citizenship. I think it needs to come up again, but I also don't want to see that being like a 12-issue run.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and
I don't want to see the next story in Superman being Citizenship. And then we see him going from talk show to talk show. I don't want that at all. I think you can address it in the context of a battle where, along the way, you have that little downtime moment where you have this quick, meaningful conversation, like maybe what happened in Grounded with Batman and Superman, where, in the epilogue of a big battle, these two heroes kind of, so what's up with this? Which is a lot of what I 100% know that's exactly what you were getting at, saying, okay, we just battled it out together. I was ticked at you at the beginning of the battle because of what you did, but throughout the way I saw that you are still this man that I've respected all along, so what are you doing? What is the deal anyway? And, addressing that, I think that would be cool, and I do want to see that. You have to do that, I think.
And I would like to see Superman do some international stuff. I'd like to see him branch out and be all over the place and have him... in another part of the world doing something over there, and then zipping back, to Metropolis or zipping over here, and I'd like to see him around a little bit more. I think that would be kind of a cool story of him fighting big bads all over the place and, kicking some serious butt.
Weren't you always under the impression that he did that, though?
Hmm?
Weren't you always under the impression that he did that, though?
Yeah, but I want to see it.
Oh, I agree. No, and I guess what I'm saying is, I think part of the point of this story is to demonstrate why he can do that. And to me, if you don't show us that, this is pointless. It needs to happen.
Because they'll make references to stuff that happened off camera, like, had a flood over there, or I had a volcano in this country, but they're just little comments. I'd like to see the story play out. We actually see him doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Even if he's not, for me, I would have no issue with him, even if it wasn't about him fighting a big bad. If he was fighting a volcano that was erupting, and they show panels of him flying in, saving people, and doing Superman type of stuff. I like seeing the big Superman fights, but I don't need to see that from him. I just seeing him do some cool stuff. I think that would be a great way to go after this story is played out.
I think what'll be interesting to see about this story is a year from now, was this necessary?
Yeah.
If cool moments like what we're talking about happen, then yeah. If not, and if it's just kind of dropped, I don't know.
Yeah, I will laugh my head off if this was only supposed to be just some little thing that they didn't even think anything. Oh yeah, that'd be a neat story, yeah, and not even think that it's going to cause such a huge outrage.
The one interesting part about this, an interesting twist. One of our listeners asked, and I apologize. I talked to like 3 different people in the thread, so I apologize for not having the name off the top of my head. But the question came about Clark Kent, and does this affect Clark? Well, Clark didn't renounce his citizenship. But the question came up, does that make this meaningless? And no, because Superman's, as a public figure, in the public eye, did this. So it doesn't affect Clark in the sense that Clark's still a citizen, Clark still operates the way that he does. And that can be a way for Superman, as Clark Kent, to, really kind of embrace, those, and do things for the U.S., and for his country in the media the way that he always has. Or maybe defend Superman's actions. Because Clark Kent's supposed to be, a good friend of Superman's, defend a lot of what Superman's trying to do in the newspaper and in the media. It'd be curious to see if it does play into the Daily Planet and Superman's role. And I don't know, I guess my question and why I sound so tentative on that is, while I want to see this addressed, and I do think it's a cool way to add a new twist and element to Superman storytelling, I don't want to see this overshadow what I think needs to be great Superman stories as well. I think there needs to be a balance of playing around with stuff like this, playing around with his relationship with Lois, playing around with, his rogues gallery, playing around with new villains and big events and world events and, supporting cast. I think you need to get all those elements in and not too much of any one of those. I think it's where you can keep things interesting. So I don't know. I'm curious to see where this really goes. Yeah, I really liked the story because it made me care. And honestly, here's the funny thing. You cared too, and so did everybody else who responded. It might have been a negative, where you're like, this was terrible or something like that. And I respect that. But boy, it got people talking.
Oh, this definitely had evoked an emotional response in people. And it's anytime you have any type of emotional response from a comic, I think it's a good thing. Plus, it's a reason why you got to read it more than once. Because if I had only read this once, I, as I said, I was at a completely different place than where I am now. And though we're not seeing eye to eye on everything, we are both looking at this as a positive thing for the Superman story, where there's both a lot of positive, cool stuff that can come out of this. And I'm hoping this is continuity. Where when I first read this, I was, as I said, I was very angry, and I was in a place where I was like, "What the heck?"
This is an interesting conversation too, because a lot of times when you and I have debates like this, there's a real sense of this need for one of us to win on both sides. You know, you want to win on your end, I want to win on my end. I don't feel that vibe at all from our discussion. It's more of any time where you and I have gotten emotionally charged, it was getting our ideology on this out there. Versus it being, because I'm not like sitting here, I don't have this overwhelming feeling like, Jim, you're wrong. I don't feel, as a matter of fact, I will go on a limb and say, I don't feel that at all in our discussion here. It's exactly the opposite. I'm interested and intrigued by how you read the story and how you approached it, but I don't feel any element of what you're saying is wrong for you. And I find that cool because it's a different sort of debate than you and I are used to having. It's very different than Reluctant Leader, where we were very clearly on two different sides of the argument on that. So I do find this is an interesting and I do think my octagon, and it's probably a much larger shape.
No. I think we're more in agreement than disagreement on this. I think there's just some points that we're both going to just look at it a little bit differently, but I think for the important stuff, you know, was this cool story? Was this good for the Superman story? We're both in agreement on that.
Do you think this is negative for DC?
No.
I don't either.
Let me rephrase my no, because that was a quick no. For me, I don't think it's negative. I think if no one reads the story, if no one looks at it beyond just the one read through, it can be very negative for DC. I think, you know, just the headline, just Superman renounces his citizenship, you know, will anger people just hearing those words. You know, it's funny, I had a conversation with, you know, my mom about this, and I was just, you know, sitting there just BSing with her, and I mentioned it, and she's like, "What?" And she had that shocked look on her face, and then I started going into the discussion, why and all that. It's like, oh, that's kind of neat. She came around once she got all the details, once she heard the story and what it was going for. But I think if people don't take the time to get the full story, to get that multiple read-throughs and look at it, you know, one as a reader, look at it personally, look at it, you know, in all these different ways we've looked at it, it's going to turn negative for DC. So I think that's going to be curious to see where this goes.
There's no bad publicity. And let me explain that. First of all, I 100% agree with everything you just said. But I think the people that aren't going to read the story, no matter what, if they had said Superman does something amazingly good for the world in there, or, you know, Superman reaffirms his citizenship, those same people aren't going to read that story either.
Right.
I think what's going to happen is there's going to be people are going to be like, oh, I gotta go read that. And I think that's going to happen from this, where I think we're going to see people picking up Action 900 just to see what happened. You know, like, what was the story that led to this? Do you know what I mean? And I think that's an example where there's no such thing as bad publicity, because I think that you're going to get certain people who try out the book. Now, is that successful or not? Depends on, do any of those people then continue reading? We'll see. And I think that whether that was planned or not, because I do think that there's a possibility what you're saying, joking around, is this is meant to be a very contained story. I think that's a very strong possibility. So, I mean, that could be something where this turns into a very happy accident. But I find this whole thing fascinating because of that. It's an interesting story. And even at the end, I don't feel like we've reached a firm conclusion, because I don't think there is one.
No. And it's. I don't think there is. There's never going to be a this is right, this is wrong, this is how it is, this is how it not is. And that's actually kind of a cool coolness of the way the story was crafted, in that it leaves it so open for more interpretation. It leaves itself open for future stories. There's a lot that can come out of this if they go with it. If this is just a one shot in 900 and it was meant only to be a story told in issue 900, then okay, it was a cool story. If they meant it as being a kind of an image as to what's to come in Superman, this would be a great sneak peek.
It'd be funny, like next issue, Superman announces, I was just joking.
Yeah. I was just kidding.
or wait, or about this, he never actually went to the UN.
Yeah.
Because wait, we haven't seen him do that. Wouldn't that be the funny joke? He never went to the UN. Because really, that's all. Wait, all Superman has said is that he's gonna go to the UN and do it. He didn't. We never saw him actually do it.
Yeah, it hasn't happened yet. So.
Oh, it's fascinating. Anyway, our show voicemail line is 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We welcome, not just about Superman or this discussion. We always welcome your comments. And on this episode, we actually have another voicemail that we'll be sharing as well. So we always, any DC comic, anything, going on around comics, any comic-related topic that, you find interesting that you want to get on the show, please, I love the interactivity. Please feel free to use that voicemail line to get that on there, and, we love having you a part of the show.
There they are, all alone except for that old character.
Oh, my son's walking in. Here, hold on a sec. Hey, Finn. How are you doing? You going to bed? It's about time. Good night. You want to say hi to the Raging Bullets guys? Yeah, here, hold on a second.
Hello.
Hi, Finn. How are you?
Good.
Good. Finn, do you have a favorite superhero?
Yeah.
Who's your favorite?
I would say Robin.
Good call. Good call.
Why is Robin your favorite?
Well, when I was younger, I used to like Batman, and Robin is Batman's sidekick.
Cool. So just over time, you kind of like the sidekick more?
Yeah.
What do you think is the best thing about Robin? If I said to you, I don't know who Robin is, tell me what's the best thing about Robin?
I like the way he fights. I like Superman.
Oh, Superman's cool, yeah. Two very different characters, too. Are you watching Robin on TV at all right now?
I'm watching the old Batman show.
Oh, the one where it was like real people?
Yeah.
That's the one I watched when I was a kid. It's Robin on that a lot, too. Hey, Finn, can you do us a favor? Can you say Hawkman?
Yeah, Hawkman.
Do you know who Hawkman is?
He said it years ago on the show.
Oh, okay.
You said your dad had you get on the microphone for us a couple years ago and say Hawkman, and I've still got it on the show. We still put it on every so often. So you're famous.
Yay!
Well, Finn, it was very good to talk to you, buddy.
Yeah, you too.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, Finn. That's a cool kid.
Now, Sean, you are not allowed to splice in when you say, well, who's your favorite? You're not allowed to splice in that Hawkman. You're not allowed to do that.
This is one of the advantages of doing the editing.
That should work.
I could actually turn that into a bullet, because we've got Finn from years ago saying Hawkman.
Yes.
So so I could splice it in now, not necessarily during that segment, but I could splice it in. Who's your favorite character? Hawkman.
And even what do you like about him? He said the way he fights.
Oh, that would be perfect.
You can really
You know what would be funny to do?
The redub, the Finn redub. He really likes Robin a lot. He really digs him.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? If you think about the character of Robin, though, the premise why that character was created was to make Batman's world accessible for little kids. He was the one that was supposed to be your character that you would latch onto and feel like you could be a part of that world.
Right. Yeah. The entryway character kind of thing.
Yeah. So the whole premise is cool.
He's in grade right now. You teach third grade?
Yeah. That's exactly what I teach.
Yeah. Yep. He's a third grader.
Third graders are comic book sponges too. They
really are. He reads. I've got a bunch of DC archives, and I've got all those Millennium Edition reprints, and I've got some Marvel Masterpiece stuff, and he eats that stuff up.
Yeah, I put comics in my classroom all through, and from independent straight on through. And there's a lot of product that's available that's very accessible to kids, and they're of a great age for it. Even if I've got the life, well, yeah, I've got yes, in my third grade room I've got Watchmen. I've got like the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, and that's just the density of that. It's too much for some of my kids. But here's one of the great things, though. My highest readers can enjoy it. My kids that are my lowest readers can enjoy it because of the visual storytelling. Mm-hmm. So they're able to connect over the same piece of literature through two different avenues into the story. So no matter where my kids are at level-wise, they all can read the book together and talk about it. Their understanding and comprehension of the story is coming from different sources because of how it's produced.
That's wonderful. That's one of the marvelous things about comic books is, as soon as a kid's old enough to hold a book and turn pages, they can read a comic book. I mean, they can't read all the words, but that's not necessarily what reading is.
And the comprehension piece to me is pivotal. So, and comic books are a great way for kids that are having trouble with comprehension to understand a beginning, middle, ending of a story, which they need to see. And it helps writers, too. But kids that have writing difficulties, to have them draw and storyboard their own stories. A lot of those kids that maybe aren't such solid writers are wonderful storyboarders.
Well, that's interesting because Finn, when he usually, not all the time, but I would say about half the time, if he has to do a drawing for an assignment at school, or if we're doing something at home, he will take a piece of paper and he will divide it into 4 panels or something and draw a sequence of events with a beginning and a middle and an end.
Cool. Yeah, and for them to use that then to transfer that over into writing, wonderful.
Yeah, it's really neat.
That's cool. I can't believe he's in 3rd grade now.
Yeah, I know. It's something else.
We've known you quite a long time now.
Yep.
Hawkman.
Once again, sponsoring this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, we're talking about archives on this episode, and these archive editions from DC are wonderful collected hardcover volumes. They have, right now for pre-order, the Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane Archives hardcover Volume 1. It's 40% off, only $35.99. If you haven't collected these volumes, it's wonderful. Archive quality paper. This collects Showcase 9 and 10 and Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane number 1 through 8. And that's DCBService.com, your comic book pre-order source. Over at InStockTrades.com, they're offering an amazing special right now. If you've been on the fence about picking up some of these volumes, like we were talking about Adam Strange on this episode, they have the Adam Strange Archives, Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. Each one of these is a $50 book. It's 50% off, only $25, and all their archive editions, it looks like, are at 50% off right now, which is an amazing sale. And that's InStockTrades.com, and they're your hardcover trade paperback collected edition source. And the great thing is, orders of $50 or more get you free shipping, so definitely check them out. Our sponsors, DCB Service and InStockTrades.com, have a convention. It's Summit City Comic Con, June 18th, 2011, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Grand Wayne Center. That's 120 West Jefferson Boulevard, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Go to the website, check out the amazing guest list, SummitCityComicCon.com. My goal this week is to come back around Thursday. We did a segment that was on the Brightest Day conclusion and the Justice League Generation Laws conclusion. So I'm probably going to release that as a short little mini episode this week around Thursday. So it'll be a shorter episode, probably about an hour tops. And I'll be releasing that. I think I've got a listener voicemail too, so it might be a little bit longer because of that. But then we've got Mark Vickers is going to be joining us for the next episode after that. He was our contest winner back for the Sensei Super Snuggie contest. And he's going to be joining us to talk about 3 books. We're going to be talking about the most recent issue of Red Robin, the most recent issue of Superboy, and we're also going to be talking about the most recent issue of Teen Titans. So he wanted to join us for those 3 books, so it'll be great to have another voice on the show to talk about those. And we got coming up, we're going to be doing an episode, I don't know when it's going to be released, but it'll be over the next month. We're going to be doing an episode on Green Arrow Longbow Hunters, the classic book. We're going to be joined by Peter Rios from Comic Geek Speak. And I want to shout out, over on Comic Timing's website, they've just released an episode where we did The Dark Knight. It's the David Finch series, where we got to talk about that book. And it's one that I'm actually anxious to talk about on our show again as the series is released, and we get to see the conclusion of the first arc, because I'm going to be curious to see how I feel about the whole thing when the whole arc is together as well. But you get some great different viewpoints on that episode of Comic Timing, so be sure to go over the Comic Timing website and check out that episode. And I have a link to their website in the show notes. And their website website is speakgeekspeak.com/comic timing. There's a link on our website, which has been there in our podcast section, and also they'll be right in the show notes of this episode, so you can go right to our website and just click on it from that way as well. But we had a lot of fun talking to them. It's long overdue that we get a chance to visit the Comic Timing guys. We will see everyone next week.
Bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see, Hawkman, your plan. And what you do to me, Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up.